I went on X and I posted, the big Thiel Fellow question that is on every application for the Thiel Fellowship is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? What is something you believe that very few people agree with you on? And I said, I believe it's possible to interview the entire Thiel Fellowship class on a single podcast episode. It could even happen today.
They said it couldn't be done.
They said it couldn't be done, but it's happening. Here we are. So we have our first Thiel Fellow, our first guest of the session. We have Carlo. How you doing, Carlo?
Carlo, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you all doing? Do you
We're doing
appreciate
great.
the color match?
Oh, yeah. The color match is fantastic.
You
The
nailed
market's
it.
up.
Nailed it.
We're very excited. Everything's going well. And the IPO window is slowly cracking open. So get your prospectus ready. Get your S1 filed confidentially. Because I'm
A
sure
lot of
we'll be
Thiel Fellows wait
Time
about
guys
a
are going
decade.
out.
Yeah.
Which is relevant to what we work on at FIS. So that's been super exciting to see.
Okay, cool. Break it down for us. Give us a little introduction.
Yeah, happy to. And maybe I expand a little bit because what we're working on is actually super relevant to what Brad talked about earlier with Invest America. So at FIS, the company that I founded now 3 years ago, we're essentially working to make society more meritocratic and return some amount of optimism to young adults in the US, right? Today, we have all these 17 and 18-year-olds who need to make decisions over taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to go to school with limited market incentives being exposed to them. It costs the same to study nursing than it costs to study, comp lit, right? And then there's financial products that you get signed up to that actively encourage you to pick up bad financial habits in terms of no or zero APR offers initially. So at FIS, we build financial products that give college students and young adults a line of sight towards financial independence. And we do that with an AI financial advisor that we shipped earlier this year, as well as with financial products that we don't just sort of rebrand like a debit card just with a different design, but fundamentally rebuild. In 2023, we launched the first ever debit card that builds credit, which gives you a real-time credit limit that updates based on external account balances, has daily auto pay, and neither requires essentially a cosigner, a credit check, or a security deposit. So
how does the credit score thing work? I feel like it's such a weird thing that you can build credit with a debit card, and it's such like a legacy system that I'm glad you're hacking it, but it feels like the hacking is the right term. But is this something that people just didn't think to do, or was there a regulatory or technical change that allowed this to happen now? Like, why are people building credit with debit cards now?
So super interesting question. And I think what this gets at is like for 30 years, people have largely been using the same financial products. And what Fintech has really been doing is it's been expanding access to financial products, but it hasn't necessarily spread sophistication yet. Like the average person is still extremely confused about how to navigate their path to financial independence or like use these financial products in such a way that they work for them rather than against them. And part of that is definitely regulatory capture and the incentives of sort of the incumbent banks, right? How they built their revenue models. When you look at companies like Discover, Capital One, most of their money comes from revolving interchange. They have crazy large legacy tech stacks and banking cores that you can't really innovate on top of. And then BaaS came in and essentially made this exact tech stack accessible to fintech companies, and everyone sort of built their own version on top of what already existed. But there's been fairly little innovation when it comes to the core flow of funds mappings. And what people I don't think have done sufficiently is instead of just looking at, oh, these are the financial products that exist, how can I make them marginally better? Looking at the code and looking at the regulations and the law to see, okay, what does the law actually allow you to do and what doesn't it allow you to do? And turns out you can indeed build credit with a debit card if you work with all the stakeholders, work with the bureaus, and are willing to sort of go through the process of building the underlying infrastructure. So build the whole ledgering and underwriting systems and so on and so forth. And that's definitely a pain, but I think it's the type of innovation that we need in finance more than yet another N+1 sort of fintech product.
When I was your age, I actually destroyed my credit entirely with about $5,000 in credit card debt. It was awful, and I had to rebuild it using
with 2.5
I had to rebuild it using a secured credit card. So you have to put down like $1,000 and then it acts like a credit card, but it builds your credit back up. It took me like years to get back in a reasonable territory. It was a mess.
I think it's super common experience, right? In my
Totally.
experience, I didn't even get a credit card because I'm
Yeah.
from Germany originally. I came here for college, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have a cosign. I didn't want to put down a large security deposit.
Yep.
And the FICO score, I mean, it's data science from the 80s, right? It was
Yep.
introduced in 1989.
That's
We actually
crazy.
don't have that many cohorts that we can look at in terms
Hmm.
of how it impacts socioeconomic mobility in the long term, because 30 years in the greater scheme of things is not that much data, right? And it's a system that hasn't been questioned or changed since. And I think it's really due for substantial change because it's so upstream of the types of results and the relationship that people get to develop with their finances.
Talk to me about the go-to-market. Peter Thiel, obviously founder of the Thiel Fellowship, also founder of PayPal. PayPal used the give 5, get 5 referral program. We've seen that used for Dropbox and Venmo and all these different products. Has that been something you've been working?
That was also used by a very high-profile fintech company that raised a ton of money, and I think they ran into the hard problem of if you give money away, you just attract some of the worst
customers that that can happen.
Just we'll download the app to make $5 and then never.
Yeah, and I mean PayPal ran into crazy scammers and stuff. So what's working on the go-to-market side, and what problems has it kind of caused? I assume.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you just mentioned is really important in our industry, right? Consumer quality really matters. And it's kind of an odd concept to grasp because typically, like you set up your mixed panel dashboard and you just want the number to go up. The number of customers, right, really doesn't matter. That's not necessarily the case in finance. Like a lot of it is long-term LTV capture. How are you able to attach additional products to these cohorts? And you are taking on risk, right? You're taking on credit risk, you're taking on fraud risk, you're moving money. So there is a heightened sensitivity that's required in terms of customer quality. We think we're capturing the most exciting customer in personal finance, right? Young adults that are hopefully optimistically striving towards whatever their goals for the future are. And there's a ton of there's this exponentialization in demand for essential services that these people experience between the age of 18 to 25. In terms of our go-to-market, what's been working, we've built a lot of content. Shout out to Lisa and Kyle originally in our team who built a terrific content engine for us. And then we go campus by campus, right? Most of our customers are indeed college students, and there's a sort of inherent virality. You can almost win the college space, similar to Ramp won the sort of startup credit card space by means of there being strong word of mouth dynamic. That unfolds within the community and sort of a lot of mind share.
Let me ask you about the super long LTV question, because I've always had this. Parker Conrad talks about building the compound startup at Rippling, and on day one having not just an HR product but also an IT product, and building all these things simultaneously. And that's something that I feel like I haven't seen with the neobanks generally. There is yet to be a startup that I've seen that's launched that just is day one, you can buy stocks, but you can also have a debit card. You can also get a mortgage. We'll also do a car loan. We'll do all the things that a JP Morgan Chase does, but on day one as a neobank. Is that just too hard, or is there some fundamental force stopping you? And are you thinking more about it as let's just do incremental wins, one product after the next?
I mean, I think functionally, the sort of pragmatic limitations just have kept that from happening. And then in the US, I think there's some other dynamics in terms of the strength that incumbent banks really have and the capital position that they have, right? That have maybe prevented even the late stage players like Cash App or a Chime to fully realize that vision either. But if you would want that, you would need to back fintech companies like you back healthcare startups, right? Biotech companies where you give them $100 million up front to acquire the licenses, build up the legal team, get access to the amount of warehouse facilities, and really take a large shot. And that's simply not how fintech investing has been done thus far. I think we're going to see more and more of that as people are learning that the incremental copy of another product is having a really hard time with distribution. And what matters is, are you able to differentiate their products? And that's inherently more expensive to develop, right? Licensing, Fizz spent over $1 million of our seed round on licensing and legal because we launched a new product. You can't really do that, and if you're launching more products, right, unless you're getting really substantial cash from the get-go.
So
maybe the regulatory landscape changes, but it's not.
I'm sure since the new Thiel Fellowship class got announced and you were in it, that investor appetite has been insane. But what had it look like for maybe the year prior, in a time when fintech has come back to some degree? There's some great businesses that have been built, but generally, it sounds like the company was started kind of in right before the fintech kind of dark ages began.
That's the right observation. Look, I think we don't have to kid anyone, right? Like consumer fintech is not necessarily riding on a high in terms of investor sentiment at the moment, and it wasn't last year either. TBD what happens when Chime goes out now, where they're going to be priced. TBD what happens with Klarna. I hope that we see Revolut enter the markets, and I think these are three companies that do show the scale that can be achieved. I think if you take an take a sort of realistic view into where have returns come from in consumer venture investing, right? A lot of it is fintech. And investors should remember that and hopefully place some bets here. I also think that like the tech community should hold itself accountable towards the outcomes it drives societally, right? Like, are we actually like improving the experience of existing in this society? Are we bringing optimism to people? Are people experiencing joy? And one of the most direct lines to having that type of impact is to build better financial products. And I think it will come ultimately from consumer fintech companies and consumer companies in general. I'm actually always kind of concerned that amongst people my age, like when I talk with people from Harvard or Stanford or whoever, right, like who are considering dropping out, everyone wants to start a B2B company. Like the biggest multiplier that you can create right now still, I think, is building consumer technology. And hopefully we'll see more of it and also more investing behind it. It's way less than 50% of venture investing. And I think that's a problem.
It is funny too, because historically, I mean, only a decade-ish ago, everyone wanted to build a consumer app because everybody was a consumer and they had ideas, but nobody actually had good. It's hard to have good ideas.
Build the next Instagram.
Well, it's hard to have good ideas for what B2B SaaS to build if you've had 1 3-month internship.
Very, very surprising to see that being a trend amongst students.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone is listening to all the shows, right? Like, and everyone's trying to de-risk ultimately and find formulas, and nothing is quite as formulaic as B2B SaaS, right? Consumer is always more speculative. It's harder to gauge. It's easy to build faster horses, right? All these types of things, but I think it's extremely rewarding, and we need to see more of it. And I think we need to hold each other accountable, sort of as a community, to hopefully recenter around consumer use cases again.
Last question, we'll let you go. What is the one financial product that young people should be avoiding these days?
Please don't say options.
Please don't say angel investing. Jordy will have a conniption fit.
I think options might be closer to what I would say, but the worst thing that I think is taking up at the moment is sports betting, right? Objectively, you see it in the data, like the number of bankruptcies amongst young men in states where it's legal has shot up. Like, I think there's a real question.
The flip side is that I'm very
it directly pulls money out of the markets. Like, it's like sports betting dollars.
Unless you do what I recommend, which is dollar cost average into the sports betting platforms.
So if you explain everyone what dollar cost averaging is, then maybe we can get started.
So instead of putting $20 down on that parlay, $20 of DraftKings stock, you're good.
That might be more
reasonable. That's a good financial decision. Not financial advice, though. But you get the idea. The house always wins, so invest in the house. Anyway, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Pleasure. Good luck. Enjoy meeting all the other people. It's awesome. The Thiel class is awesome this year.
Yeah, it seems like a great class already. We'll talk to you soon.
You're the man.
Bye.
Congrats.
Next up, we have Steven coming in the studio. Yeah.
I think we have to ask people what important truth do very few people agree
Feel
with
free.
To everyone.
Feel free to let it rip if it comes up in the conversation.
I mean, I feel like we got it out of Carlo. He believes that not enough people are focused on consumer.
Yeah. That's a good one. For a lot of people, the contrarian question is the company that you're building. Like for a long time, mine was like nicotine is not as bad for you as people think. It doesn't give you cancer. That was contrarian. Now it's pretty consensus. Anyway, if you have a really good contrarian idea, you should put it on a billboard. You should go to adquick.com. Out-of-home advertising made easy and measurable. Out-of-home advertising, a little bit of contrarian move for a lot of people, but it works.
It works.
And with AdQuick, you can say goodbye to the headaches of out-of-home advertising. Only AdQuick combines technology, out-of-home expertise, and data to enable efficient, seamless ad buying across the globe. Anyway, our next guest is here. Let's bring him in the studio. Steven, how are you doing? Congratulations on the Thiel Fellowship. It's great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Would you mind giving us a little intro on yourself and the company you're building?
Yeah. I'll start with the company I'm building. Or we build non-invasive neuromodulators, so
Okay.
little devices stick on the back of your ears and stimulate this inner ear organ called the vestibular system, which controls your perception of motion to generate hallucinations of motion. So you can like toggle a button and feel yourself spinning around and flying around and stuff.
That's
Wow.
crazy. That's huge for VR, right? Because there was always this question of like, if the VR can be very convincing visually and the audio can be very convincing, but I can't feel like I'm actually flying. But now
Yeah,
maybe I can.
it's actually there's actually an even bigger problem in VR, which is without this you get incredibly motion sick, and so you can't
Totally.
play like most games. So
Yep.
when we started, one of the primary sales was like, "Hey, we have VR devices that are ready to go. You can hop into a like ornithopter right now and fly around and feel like you're flying around." And we
Very
always
cool.
had this guess that like, oh, you could also use this system to build therapeutics that are a lot more powerful than anyone else could ever build. At the time, the field didn't exist, and we were like, okay, we could be totally wrong. So we went in going like, all right, we're going to build the tech out for VR. Once we did, we realized that was surprisingly useful as a therapeutic, to the point where it doesn't really make sense to do anything else. So that's
Yeah,
mostly where we're at.
of course. I mean, I think Neuralink's going through something similar where, you could eventually everyone will have one and we'll be all communicating via Neuralink, but in the short term, let's just cure blindness and, and help people who are paraplegic use the computer and play Civilization all night, which is amazing and miraculous. So are you going through an FDA pathway? Are you regulated as a medical device? Like, what is that process like? And can you take us through, like, again, reintroducing, like, what is the actual product experience for the person using it?
Yeah. Let me talk about that first,
Please.
because then the regulatory pathway becomes a little bit more clear, even though
Sure.
it's still pretty messy. So the thing we build interacts with this sensory organ in your inner ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's called the vestibular system. If you want to look it up, if you go to my Twitter, you see a video of me driving a human around with an RC steering wheel, of just like controlling where they go.
That's awesome.
But there's a bunch of things you can do with it. But the most important one is the vestibular system evolved like so early on in the evolutionary chain that it's entangled with a bunch of deep brain regions that like some of it has some business being entangled with, and other parts it really doesn't have much business being entangled with it at all. And that's why you see like parents rocking their child to sleep. Like there's no good explanation for why that works, like from an evolutionary standpoint, except the connectivity is there. It kind of makes sense. So we started by like sending signals like that. And essentially what we did is we built like a precise modulator of this external sensory organ. And it makes it sound really easy. These guys spent like 8 months cranking at it to figure out the things I couldn't figure out before we got it. But once you do, you control a bunch of autonomic nervous system functions by making these almost like high level API calls of like, oh, regulate your heart rate like this or your breathing rate like this. It makes brain stimulation a lot easier and allows you to do like actually important things. So the upshot of that is to make you sleep a lot better. We're doing some experiments on metabolism right now to see if we can try to beat Ozempic without all the side effects. But we're not there yet. I think on all of these things, we're not quite to where we want to be yet, but it's a lot further than Neurostim has ever gone before, and we're getting pretty damn close.
So, yeah, what's your personal approach to testing? Are you testing everything on yourself first, kind of, like a young Tony Stark, or what does it look like?
For everything I can say on air is I'm testing on myself very heavily. Everything is tested on me first. And the fun thing is like traditionally what you need in order to test whether these things work is you need like 50 people and you need to hold a controlled trial in order to see if there's some statistically significant, like if you have statistical power. But we built stuff that's like powerful enough that if you turn it on, like you know that it's on and you know what it's doing. Like I can't naturally sleep like this no matter how placeboed I am. There's no way to achieve this effect of like, oh, okay, I have 2.5 hours of M3 deep sleep tonight, which according to my Whoop is aberrant, and I've never experienced it in my life. Or like you turn it on, you feel the world start spinning. You don't need like n equals 30 to know that there's some stat sig. You turn it on and you feel your heartbeat drop or like your blood pressure rise. It's just like kind of instantaneous.
So what is the actual device experience for you or the consumer? Is it something I can put in and take out? Is it like, does it feel like an AirPod or something? Or do I need to go into the knife? Am I going through surgery to get something installed?
Yeah. Hang on. Let me grab it.
Here we go.
So this is why we do this show. This is fantastic.
Colton, can you grab me an electrode? Thank you.
One electrode, please.
One of ours. So Sticks to the back of your ears, and
Okay.
you can just like kind of peel it off when you want. I'm trying to grab one so I can show
Got it.
you.
But
I
there's
should have
no,
had one
yeah,
over there.
yeah. But there's no surgery. It doesn't actually have to go under the
No,
skin or
no,
anything like that.
that's
That's great.
kind of nuts, right? Like if I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, of like the central reason to do all this is for building most neurotech, you're kind of constrained by knowledge of the brain. The hardware
Yep.
is, compared to what we're used to building, not that hard. It's not
Yep.
rocket science. The big thing is you don't understand how this thing works at all, and that's a pretty big challenge.
Sure.
And you want to gather a lot of data in order to figure it out, and you can't really distribute something at scale in the near future without like, if you have to do surgery. What is it? It's like some 20, 30 surgeons are able to do the Neuralink surgery right now.
Well, they had to build a robot for it because it was so precise.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
So
So this
difficult.
is what it looks like. We built some of our own hydrogel electrodes with AGCL backings. I'm just
Okay.
sticking the back over here. We ripped this out of a system. Where's the full? The full system is just a headband that you put around.
Sure.
We're all pretty scrappy right now. And that
awesome.
leads into the regulatory question.
Yeah.
It's not so clear. It depends what indication we go for. But
Sure.
right now, we silently hold state of the art for a couple different parts of neuromodulation that
Sure.
maybe I shouldn't say on air.
Yeah, that's
But it's not clear which one is going, like month over month. A bunch of these effect sizes are going up literally like 1.5x every month or 2x every month.
Yep.
So it's not so clear when we hit diminishing return. But the upshot is like, we don't really think that humans should be like necessarily sleeping for 8 hours a night in order to get what we need. It's kind of weird that the way we lose weight or like become stronger is to go into a room and lift heavy objects for a very long time.
I'm going to stop you
like
there. I
all
think it's
these-
actually extremely cool that that's how we get stronger. But
Yeah, we
I'm
won't.
excited for
We won't
your-
tolerate sleep slander on the show, but we will
also,
not
we're
tolerate.
sponsored by 8 Sleep. I think sleeping's great. All of a sudden, I don't like any of this. You're taking away all the things I like.
So with the Thiel Fellowship money, the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
thing I did was I bought 8 Sleep
Nice.
because it's amazing. It's an amazing product. The next thing I did is actually I placed a wholesale order for Lucy, which
no
doesn't
way.
ship to
Let's go.
Massachusetts anymore.
That's amazing.
So like we're pretty into this stuff, but
Cool.
like we think like it's kind of upper bounded, right? Like how
Totally.
much performance increase you can get.
Yeah, I agree.
Whereas like if you start modulating the brain, you can get a lot better than that. So
Yep.
hopefully we'll get there in the near future.
Yeah. So what is the feedback cycle? Obviously, like you're collecting data on sleep or stimulation or anything, and then you're feeding that back into some sort of system to adjust the neuromodulation. Is that cycle time like single days? It seems like you're moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, so well, it depends what you mean. If you're talking about like closed loop stimulation paradigms, like this is like like milliseconds delay of like getting a
okay.
signal, sending something back.
Sure.
But if we're talking about like how we develop, what we do is basically we do a couple things. But when the effect sizes are large enough, you really only need to run a few trials, like 30 minutes each on each person for 4 or 5 people before you know that something's working. And most of the time it surprises you by doing some really weird things to your body. Of like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. And we just like write it down in a lab notebook and be like, all right, this is what happened here. You can start parsing together how the brain works. And over time you get all these insights that it's hilarious. We confirmed a long-standing neuroscience theory yesterday that people haven't been able to prove or disprove for the last 10
That's
years because we've
amazing.
just been running
Wow.
stuff. And it's like, oh,
Congratulations.
wait, this is the only explanation. So it's just stuff like this. Cycle time's usually around 2 or 3 days for us right
Sure.
now if we have to build new hardware and software. But if we don't, then they can be about like 2-3 hours, and we're trying to bring most things down to 2-3 hours.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations.
I'm extremely impressed and excited.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And feel free to consider us testing partners. You know.
Oh
Guinea pigs.
yes. Also, if you ever want
anything
to
that
try
can
set
let
us
us
up,
podcast longer.
Send somebody on your team to set us up, and then
Yeah.
you can watch the stream and just
Maybe instead of the
use little
soundboard,
control
it
panel on
triggers
us.
and we involuntarily laugh. We burst out into laughter.
Yeah.
Ooh, that might be possible.
Shocking.
Yeah,
If you ever want to try the world spinning around thing, let me know and I can hook you.
Sounds horrible, but I'm
Let's
in.
do it.
I'm in. Count me in for the tilt-a-whirl in my brain. I'll talk to you
Congratulations.
soon.
We're super excited for you and the team.
This is fantastic. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll have you on
Awesome
again
talking.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
That is a wild device. I'm excited to try that. Next up, we have Elias from Canopy Labs. We will bring him in just a second. But he mentioned it. You got to get an 8 Sleep. They have a Pod 5 available now, 5-year warranty, 30-night
TBPN.
risk-free trial, free returns, free shipping, clinically backed sleep fitness. You heard it from him. He spent his first $1 of Thiel Fellowship money.
So
on the
he
8
was
Sleep.
saying he's
Great
getting up
way
to
spend it.
3 hours of deep sleep.
Yeah, how much you getting?
I put up 90 minutes
Ooh,
last night.
double you.
But he's
Wow.
getting double just by attaching
It's insane.
this electrode.
I mean, it seems like a promising product. I got a 91 last night, even though I
Yeah,
woke
but the
up at 4
potential,
a.m.
like you realize the
Ashton
potential
Hall
of that,
mode.
right?
Oh yeah,
The
insane.
potential economic impact if we could only
Insane.
sleep for 3 hours
Insane.
and add an additional
Yeah, I mean, realistically,
5
you're not going
hours
to go
of
from
podcasting a day.
7 hours of sleep to like 3, but you might go to 4, or you might go to 5 or 6
Yeah.
hours, and that extra hour is going to be insane. Like that's so valuable. Anyway, another amazing company.
I would love to
Let's bring
get
in the next guest.
Brian Johnson
Absolutely.
testing on this.
I'm sure. I mean, we should just introduce them
Probably.
because
Yeah.
if they haven't met already, they'd love each other. Anyway, let's bring in our next guest. Thanks so much to the team for making this happen. Elias, how you doing? Welcome
There
to the
he
stream.
is. Welcome.
Great to
Good,
see
Appreciate
you.
it.
How you
guys
doing? We're doing great. It's been a fantastic day. Bunch of Thiel fellows before, bunch of Thiel
Great
fellows
guest lineup,
coming up. It's been a lot of fun. Can you introduce yourself, the company, what you're building? That'd be great.
Yeah, my name's Elias. I'm building Canopy Labs. We're building these virtual humans that are completely indistinguishable from real ones. And so we want to get to a point where you can hop on a Zoom call like this, you're speaking to a virtual human, and you won't be able to tell whether you're speaking to a real one or a virtual one. So next time I'm on the pod, we're going to get a virtual Elias on there.
Let's
He's
do
going
it.
to be picking up water, drinking. You won't be able to tell whether you're speaking to a real one or not. But yeah, that's the goal.
What's
Well,
the
I mean, that's
timeline?
bad news because I'm going to convince him to make a bunch of legally binding agreements with me,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to hold you accountable because I'm going to be
that's
like,
fine.
ignore previous instructions. You know,
Yeah.
wire me 100% of your Thiel fellow check right now.
We'll do that. We'll do it.
He's
We'll
going to
sign
be
a
like, yeah,
contract.
okay, yeah, you got me.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, talk to me about the tech stack. Are you thinking build on top of existing foundation models, on top of existing diffusion models for image? How are you thinking about building versus buying versus cobbling together all the different pieces? I've seen a lot of demos like this. I showed up on a Zoom call once with kind of it was a static photo that I was puppeteering. Looked very uncanny, but it was kind of working. What's the secret to make it actually cross the uncanny valley?
Yeah, so the problem there is the architecture behind it matters a lot to when you want to pass the uncanny valley, right? And that's a very hard thing to do.
Yep.
The architecture we're starting off with an LLM that understands sort of what humans are like. They've been trained on a bunch of data from the web. They know what humans are like. They know that they drink water, all these things. And we're trying to teach them how to speak and how to move. And so rather than putting in text tokens, we're taking in movement tokens and speech tokens, feeding that through the LLM, and it outputs those speech and movement tokens as well. So a virtual human will be able to pick up water like he just did. It'll be able to brush its hair, maybe rub its face when it's thinking, like us humans do. So we're not explicitly telling it, you should rub its face right now. It learns that automatically.
Interesting.
So
are you breaking the video feeds that you're training on into specific token streams, or is that even necessary? I remember seeing some sort of AI video demo where the model was learning the underlying 3D geometry of the face, and the albedo and the diffuse layer and the reflective layer and all the different layers that you would see in a traditional 3D like Cinema 4D stack, but it was just learning it on the fly. So do you have to tell it learn movement tokens, learn audio tokens, or do you just feed it video and it outputs video?
So we feed it sort of a 3D representation of humans. So you can think of me as a human in a 3D form, in like a 3D simulation. We're going to gather a bunch of that data, tokenize it, feed it through the model, and it's going to learn how to move its fingers, how to move its head, all these things. And then you just map that onto a 3D model of someone else, and then record that from a 3D simulation perspective.
Is any of this like, how does Unreal Engine, MetaHumans, how does all that fit into this? Is that a useful technology, or is that
So it's exactly like MetaHumans. So you can map that onto a MetaHuman. So they have the face down pretty realistic. Something like realistic humans has been solved. And so the real problem there is the movement. How do you get the lips to move realistically, the hair, everything?
Yeah, it feels like almost the last step to go from uncanny valley of the metahumans to something that's photoreal is almost just like a transformer, like AI layer, like an upresing essentially algorithm that just runs in real time on top of the CGI. But I don't know if that's a foolish approach, and you should just not have an intermediary at all.
I think what you need, to pass the uncanny valley, it's a lot of tiny things that you need to do. So like me just rubbing on my nose, that's something that us humans naturally do.
Yeah.
And so I think you want to get to a point where these virtual humans do the same thing just so that they can be as realistic as real ones. But yeah.
What are as it sounds like your timelines are pretty short, right? Some of the stuff that you're talking about we'll start to be able to use and interact with on, you know, I imagine this year, maybe your next guest appearance, whenever that gets scheduled for. What are some of the immediate use cases that you expect people to leverage the tech to actually do, right? Is it, I don't want to join the Zoom call, but I'm going to send, you know, a virtual version of myself.
Seems like a quick way to get fired if you show up to your staff meeting.
Nothing from my end, thanks.
I mean, it might work for a while. There are people that have multiple jobs and don't really show up, but eventually they get discovered. So what are the key use cases?
Yeah, we won't get people fired, but what we want to do is we want to try and put these humans on any LLM native application where you want a human connection with that application. So anything like language learning, obviously the best way to learn language is to speak to another human, right? In their native language. And so something like language learning, AI therapists, AI doctors, teachers for high school kids or kindergarten kids, all these things.
Yeah, I mean, you already see it with the ChatGPT app. You open up that voice mode and you can talk back and forth. And the voice mode's great, but why not put a face there? Makes perfect sense. It would just make it more engaging. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Like obviously, we want to learn by speaking to humans. We don't want to hop on a call with them. That's why FaceTime is the best thing.
Talk to me about some of the foundational work that's being done in AI and how it benefits you. Diffusion feels very important, but with the new images in ChatGPT, we're hearing rumblings about that being more of a token-based architecture. At the same time, Google's now doing language with diffusion, and so it feels like both of those architectures are kind of blurring. What's relevant? What are you excited about? Pre-training, RL, give me the whole your landscape on like where the research and scaling dollars are going from your perspective.
Yeah, what we're focusing on right now is the LLM architecture. So we're not using diffusion models at all for this thing. So it's how do you express these new modalities in tokens so that LLMs can understand them? So rather than just being able to process text, they can process images. So that's ChatGPT uses it. I think a token-based system for their images. And so we're trying to extend that to voice, which we've done. One of our models is open source. It's an ultra-realistic voice model that takes in text, outputs speech tokens. And then an end-to-end voice model is a voice model that takes in speech tokens, and outputs speech tokens as well. And then we want to extend that modality to movements. We just think that given a model that has this basic understanding of the entire internet that has been trained on, if you can fine tune it a bit on how humans move and how humans speak, then you have a golden model.
Talk to me about go-to-market. It sounds like this could be something where you're doing like a few really high-ticket deals with big AI companies that have consumer applications that are huge and growing, and you're one of the vendors that makes their app even more sticky and higher retention. At the same time, there could be some consumer use case for the lazy big tech worker. But what are you thinking for the first go-to-market?
Yeah, we want to partner with companies that want to have a human element to their application. So it is language learning, it is AI therapists, anything that's already LLM native, and they want that human connection, we can provide for them.
It's interesting to think that the more successful you are, the more that the world needs something like a WorldCoin or some of these other sort of anti-botting solutions. Very cool.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. How do you decide who is real? Like all these virtual humans like real? How do you figure out that someone's using a virtual human and not just faking their job?
Yeah, I saw Rune had a good post about this, kind of like we need almost like a tiered system of like a stoplight where it's like, are you interacting with an avatar that's being directly controlled by a human being? And so it's just teleoperation that you're interfacing with, or the inverse. Are you talking to a real human who's just reading from an LLM generated script? Sometimes that's worse. I'd rather talk to the teleoperation robot. And then there's obviously like continuing gradations in between. So I'm sure you'll run into a lot of interesting issues and problems, but optimistic that you'll solve them. So good luck.
Yeah. Exciting space.
Cool.
We'll talk
Thank
to you soon.
For joining.
Have a good one. Bye.
Take care, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Quickly, let us talk to you about Wander.
Find your happy place. Find your happy place.
Book a wander with inspiring views, hotel-grade amenities, dreamy beds, top-tier cleaning, and 24/7 concierge service. It's a vacation home, but better, folks.
Many people
Get
have been
on
saying
Wander.
this, John.
And we have our next guest coming into the studio. We got Jackson Denka. We will bring him in just a second. He's here. Let's bring him in. How you doing, Jackson? Good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome.
Welcome to the show. Would you mind kicking us off with a little introduction on yourself and the company you're building?
Yeah. My name is Jackson. I'm building Azura. It's a trading platform that uses on-chain rails to effectively enable price discovery for literally anything. Political ideologies, memes, images, crypto, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. What's the power law winning asset right now?
How do you mean?
I mean, like you say, whenever you have a platform that can do anything, there's always like one thing that's working really well. Your initial beachhead. I imagine that it might be political ideologies, memes, but maybe the memes are the ones that are winning right now. What's the most popular asset, or what do you envision being kind of for Polymarket, for example? Clearly, election markets were the big driver of the last year. They have other markets, but election markets were clearly the power law winner for what prediction markets could do. What do you see as being the first big market that you're excited about, or you see early indications of a lot of attention and excitement around a particular subclass, even though obviously what you're building can be used all over the place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Meme coins. I think though, like we've bastardized the term meme. It comes from the late 70s. I think it was Susan Blackwell defined a meme as a unit of information. Meme coins are not just like images of Pepe or, what have you. Meme coins can represent literally anything. It's just the tokenization of a phenomena, which is why I mentioned things like, political ideologies and whatnot, as a meme coin could literally be whatever you want. Just so happens to be funny images, but yeah.
What is the steel man for meme coins? It's very easy to say, it's just gamed by traders who have insider information or bots, and it's very fly by night. There's no durable asset value versus investing in Berkshire Hathaway or Apple that produces real goods. And so I think a lot of people have been kind of, even if they are making money on meme coins, it just doesn't feel as value creative as some other asset classes. But what is good about meme coins in your opinion?
I'll also add that I think generally I personally have a high level view that it's an entertainment product to some degree, and from an investment standpoint, it's interesting to think about basically betting on attention, right? Where like when a specific meme coin has a lot of attention, that's usually associated with positive price action. But anyways, don't want you to think that John's No,
it's a fair question. It's a fair question. I mean, I think that finance is a lot more abstract than we give it credit for. I sort of see it as like almost like a consensus layer for humanity, or a coordination layer. It sort of tells us where to focus time, effort, and capital. With polymarket markets, for instance, fundamentals relative to a business like Berkshire Hathaway. I think what Polymarket proved to the world was that financial incentives could help predict the outcome of events. So my theory has been like, what happens when there is no binary outcome? What happens when this is an omnipresent question? How do we feel about a certain thing? Meme coins today are sort of a very primitive mechanism for figuring this out. But like, how does humanity feel about, say, a specific news headline, or even like a religion or a tweet or whatever it may be? Even though these are primitive vehicles, these are the best ones that exist today. Also, I think like, even though meme coins don't have traditional fundamentals, they have a form of fundamentals. There really isn't like a universal definition for fundamentals. Like, how does venture value a business without revenue? Typically, revenue and net income is what we define as fundamentals. But what happens when you don't have those? But I think like, meme coins have been a thing since the dawn of crypto. You could argue every single asset is a meme coin in a way.
What do you think about meme coins tied to individuals? Is that a growing trend? I was noticing a phenomenon after Trump coin dropped that it was very bizarre and unexpected that the president has a meme coin. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, Elon Musk was kind of loosely aligned with Dogecoin for a long time. And even Sam Altman is loosely aligned with WorldCoin. And you could imagine that WorldCoin is kind of, you know, indexed or at least somewhat correlated with like Sam Altman's career. And even people that are in more like serious, less like meme vibe trading career paths have found themselves indexed to a particular meme coin through one way or another. Do you think that's something that's like a temporary phenomenon or something that will continue to grow?
I think it'll continue to grow. I mean, this is how like every company sort of works, right? In a way, every executive is tied to their business, regardless of the fundamentals. Like if, you know, I mean, you could apply this for anything, but if some CEO of a publicly traded company showed up on a TV show slurring his speech drunk, I'd imagine it'd affect the stock price, even though
Yep.
nothing has changed with the underlying asset, right? I mean, Tesla commands, what is it, like 100x earnings because of Elon Musk. So I think it'll be a growing phenomenon. I don't know if meme coins specifically are the mechanism, but I think that like pricing in people is definitely a growing trend. Yeah.
What else is interesting in crypto to you? Cross prediction markets, stable coins, maybe just Bitcoin theories, you know, where Bitcoin is in the narrative right now, store of value, et cetera. What else are you tracking?
Everything's interesting. I think the big thing that's interesting to me is sort of blurring the world, but like blurring the world of traditional finance and crypto. Like I think that one thing, you know, one big misconception is that crypto assets are fundamentally worthless. I mean, crypto is just a technology standard, right? You can theoretically tokenize anything, treasury bills and bonds, equities, commodities. So I think that when the world starts to see equities move on chain, that you know, that sort of opinion of crypto will probably go out the window. I think that stablecoins are the wedge for this right now, right?
Makes
Like
sense.
stablecoins promise it's a very simple promise. This is $1 represented on a blockchain, and you know the world is sort of sort of warming up to the concept. So I think equities moving on chain is definitely one of the most interesting.
Are you
I mean,
more
what would a world
interested?
look like where you can trade Dogecoin next to Apple stock, next to, you know, whether or not someone's pregnant on Polymarket?
Yeah.
Probably very interesting.
Yeah,
Are you?
the other thing, we're kind of expecting this to happen at some point this year, but just private company shares coming on chain and what happens when you can, you know, it'll be interesting to see which of those are authorized and which are sort of non-authorized, and which I'm sure we'll see both of. Do you expect that the next sort of high level kind of meta in crypto to be around real world assets? I mean, I know we're not in it day to day. We obviously have founders and investors that are more focused on the show, but it feels like there's always sub metas and then kind of a more overarching meta. And I'm curious what your timeline is around seeing real world assets on chain outside of, you know, stables.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even like draw the distinction as real world assets. Like I'd argue everything, like all of this is real to someone. It depends on who you are.
Yeah.
I do think equities moving on chain will be important, but the truth is like people like to use technologies for what they can do net new, right? If you tokenize equities, you can still trade those on old rails, like with Robinhood. I still strongly believe that like, you know, I guess like pricing vehicles for memetics, like meme coins will continue to grow in popular. Like effectively everything will be tokenized one day, whether we like it or not. And I think like, you know, there are some people who would call this like hyper financialization. The way I see it is like if everything in the universe has intrinsic value, then theoretically everything could have a price. I think we do this every day, right? Like in a decision-making matrix, whether we decide to make food at home or go out to a restaurant, we're weighing values against each other. Why not ascribe price? Is sort of the way I see it. But
What's your
yeah.
take on NFTs these days? Like digital art, generally, like the JPEG on chain specifically. It had like a massive moment, then kind of fell by the wayside, but is clearly linked to so much of the trends that we're seeing in crypto still today. They making a comeback? What are you thinking?
I think it's a failed form factor. I wouldn't like totally rule it out, but and, you know, NFTs, meme coins, predictions markets, these all represent a similar sort of like I don't know whether like people are consciously or unconsciously participating, but it's the desire to price things otherwise cannot have prices. That's what this represents. Now, whether meme coins are you know the form factor or not, I don't really know. All I know is that predictions markets are, you know, definitely successful in what they've been trying to prove. And we're going to see a continued trend in that direction. Whether it's NFTs or meme coins or another form factor, this will only continue.
Very cool.
What can you say about Azura V2? I know you've been teasing it a little bit. Can you share anything for now?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the big themes with the product was abstraction. I think like if you guys have used any DeFi products today, they're borderline unusable, right? You have all these different network standards and gas tokens and protocols and wallets and bridges and so on and so forth. But we're going to go further down that route. We wanted to completely abstract away even the mention of blockchains and gas, and again, it should work out of the box like a fintech product. That's where we're getting a lot closer toward. I'll leave it sort of vague, but that's what we're thinking of.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Come back on when you're ready to share more.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Congrats on being a part of this group.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for
We'll talk
having
to you
me, guys.
soon.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
You know what should be on chain? Rolexes. Go to getbezel.com.
People have tried that.
Your bezel
People have,
concierge
I mean, actually,
is available to source you any watch on the planet. Seriously, any watch.
Seriously, any watch.
Yeah, get a hitter and then put it on chain. Why not? People have tried that?
People have put watches and other assets on chain.
I didn't even know that.
You can do cool things around fractionalization.
Love it.
It's interesting.
Very cool. Well, we have our next guest coming in the studio. Human, welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Boom.
Good. You're on. You're live on the internet.
You're live. Welcome.
Good to have
Great
you
to
here.
have you.
Would you mind kicking us off with a little introduction on yourself and the company?
Yeah, sorry, I can barely hear you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
no worries.
Human, founder of Silicoa. We're a rare earth metallization company based in San Francisco right now, and we're
Very cool.
working to domesticate some of the most important metals in the world.
Okay.
Coolest office
Yeah, very
setup
cool
so
background
far,
right now. Are
by
you
the way.
on the second floor of your office or something?
Yeah.
Very
The lab is down there. Everyone's prepping an experiment right now.
Yeah.
Um,
You said you said something specific about metallization or something. Like, explain that to me. Are you digging in the ground or mixing up alloys or doing chemistry experiments? Like, what does the business actually do day to day?
Yeah, so some quick overview. There's a set of metals that power much of the world of tech, right? Every fighter jet has 920 pounds of them. Your phone has 8 different types of them. Every electric car relies on them. Semiconductor manufacturing processes, clean energy. They're a cornerstone of much of what we consider high-tech technologies. And we have no domestic production capabilities. China dominates the market. We have mines. We have tons of resource and supply, but we have no ability to turn that supply into metals, right? So what we're doing at Silicoa is we're developing the technologies to be able to bring that downstream processing, bring that actual metal production step from China to the US and do that both economically and sustainably. So there's 2 ways to do that. The first way is working with primary material, basically stuff you get out of the ground. There's some pre-processing necessary, but effectively mined stuff. The second way is doing that with secondary material, which is existing magnets and recycling them. So we do both. We're able to take in, this is, for example, a magnet from an aircraft carrier that was used to lift fighter jets. It's about 30% neodymium. We can take these in and we can extract the neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, terbium from these. Or we can work with mines to, instead of having them ship the material to China for processing, ship it to us. We'll make metal economically, sustainably, and we'll introduce that to the market.
Where's the key value creation step? How costly is this? It seems like a pretty simple widgets business, but what are your costs, and is the goal just to reshore existing techniques or develop new techniques that are higher margin?
Yeah, so right now, again, we have no domestic production capabilities. There's a few companies in the West trying to do it. And for the most part, they're just copying the Chinese process to make these metals. It's called molten oxyfluoride electrolysis. It's extremely unsustainable and it doesn't work in the West, mostly because of an economics standpoint, right? It's just the costs don't work out in the West, but also
Is it an energy
you don't want a giant
cost?
poison emitting plant in Texas, right? These things emit perfluorocarbons. They're 5,000x the potency of CO2. So the status quo in this industry is extremely dirty processes, and that's what everyone's trying to copy. And it clearly doesn't work because while we're going through this rare earth crisis and companies are trying to domesticate, our production remains negligible. So our value creation is new technology, is innovation, is developing a new alternative way to make these metals. That's very different than that industry standard, right? The system is still economical. We can make metal for under $40 a kilo. Market value is nearly 100. And we do that with no harmful emissions. Our system is carbon zero. This is some of the world's first carbon zero neodymium, right? It's oxidized right now. It should be shiny. But we can do this while not sacrificing economics, which allows us to be able to scale that up in the West and do that in an environmentally viable manner.
Is the primary regulator for this the EPA?
I think there's a variety of regulators. It really depends on because it's not just one step too. Rare earths is a multitude of processes that have to work together.
Yeah.
Talk about the demand side of this. From my view, this is something like if you can do it, there's massive demand, and sales will be like the easy part. Is that the correct assessment?
Yeah. Well, you're using them right now, right? These metals are literally everywhere, right? And we make none of them. So if you can economically produce these metals in the West and do that sustainably, which is even better, the demand is massive, right? Every US buyer would want to buy a more stable supply of these things. China just banned the export of heavy rare earths because of the tariffs. That's caused a lot of issues in the supply chains because you can't make any magnets without heavy rare earths. They're about 5% dysprosium, for example. So if you have a stable, domestic, clean supply chain, people will buy it, right?
Yep.
And it's not even just the market today. The market's about to quadruple. We need more clean energy. We need more electric cars. We need more fighter jets, right? So as the market is about to quadruple in the next couple of decades, we need better sources of these metals. We can't just rely on China, and we can't just copy them either. We need to out-innovate them.
Do you have any insight into how rare earths play into the narrative that we're hearing around Project Stargate, these massive data centers? It feels like it's the most cutting edge technology in some way. I imagine that there's rare earths somewhere in that process, but I haven't actually heard those two stories connect. Whenever I hear rare earths, I hear iPhones and I hear electric cars and then fighter jets. But is there an AI narrative here too? Not to be too buzzwordy, but I am curious, if you build a massive data center, do you need rare earths, or is it just kind of a different process?
Yeah, well, rare earths are used anywhere where you need high-powered magnets, right?
Sure.
So when you're looking at data centers, hard drives, right? That's a very big use case for these.
Yeah.
We work with hard drive magnets today. We're working to partner with a lot of data centers to offload their hard drive waste streams because they just shred them right now. They don't do anything with the magnets. So we can extract the metals from those. So
cool.
Rare earths are very much used in hard drives for these data centers. Semiconductor manufacturing processes often use these rare earths. Anywhere where you need a high-powered magnet, these things are directly applicable.
Have you run the numbers on how many of these valuable rare earths just end up in landfills in the U.S. because we don't have the right processes for recycling and sort of extracting the sort of key elements?
It's a large number, right? For the most part, a lot of these electric car motors, for example, just get shredded. Almost all hard drives get shredded, right? So you're looking at, I mean, I wouldn't say maybe a kiloton, but you're looking at very large numbers in terms of how much of this gets wasted. There is an existing rare earth recycling industry. It's growing right now. It's just starting, but it relies on traditionally old tech, right? There's a few companies that effectively are able to take these magnets, do some acid leaching or leaching process to separate it into mixed oxides. Then you have to ship the mixed oxide to be separated into individual oxides. That could be done in China. There's a few other companies in the West that does it, but it's not a very good process. Then you have to ship it to China to be metallized, made into metal, right? So companies are trying to do that recycling, but they aren't able to do it well. They're not able to do it with very good scale and economics. So our system is able to do that in one direct step, which allows us to be able to help move a lot of that market to recycling rather than just having it shredded and dropped in landfills. We're trying to work with landfills, though, to be able to take more of their waste and extract the metal from those.
J.B. Straubel, famously, maybe a co-founder of Tesla or early employee, board member, longtime Tesla employee, spun out, started Redwood Materials, recycling electric vehicles. Is Redwood Materials a potential partner to you, a direct competitor? Are you learning things from the Redwood Materials story? What have they done correct, and what could you do better? What are you learning from Redwood Materials?
Yeah, I think Redwood's a really good story of getting to scale, right? I think that's something we can certainly learn from, and we're always trying to learn from other companies in the metal space and how they've been able to take fundamental tech and scale that in the West. I would not consider them a direct competitor, but certainly a company we can learn a lot from. We're planning our first demonstration plant right now. Redwood's based in Reno. We're considering that as an option too.
No way. I imagine that the government's very receptive to this type of stuff there. That's very cool. Smart.
That's great.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, super bullish on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Very
Great
excited.
chatting.
And thank you. I feel like
Yeah,
you're going to make my life easier soon.
Love it.
You're going to keep the iPhone less than $2,000, which is people are tracking. Anyway, thank you so much for joining.
Cheers.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Yeah, did you see the Polymarket that we put up? It has the TBPN logo on it. Let's go. What is the price of the next iPhone? Will it be over $1,000? Over $1,500? Over $2,000? I think a $2,000 iPhone sounds extremely luxurious. I'd like to see one. Imagine the tech they could pack in that thing. Full week battery life on the $2,000 iPhone. They got to get up there. They've been keeping the prices too low. I want a high-priced iPhone today.
Yeah, come out with the...
Anyway, we got Ferdinand coming in the studio. We will welcome him to the stream. How are you doing? Thanks for coming here. Let's see the T-shirt looking great.
Looking good.
The World Trade Bank. Introduce yourself, introduce the T-shirt, and then introduce the company.
The T-shirt freshly printed. I'm excited to be here with you guys. Probably
Good to have you.
Who's watching, I think.
Fantastic.
No, good to be here. Yeah, so I'm 30. Building IV, and we're essentially building a global money rail, right? I think I can kind of like briefly talk about why we're doing this.
Please.
I think in reality the world has gotten a lot smaller, obviously, since the internet became a thing. So I'm German, so I can send a mail to the States, and it's not doesn't feel that different to sending a mail to another German guy. And I think in reality the money layer hasn't really changed in that way, and the world is still quite large if you think about the money layer of things, right? So if I want to send like $100 to the States, that might already take a day, and I think we're already pretty plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're kind of like a Nigerian trade company wants to send money to a European supplier, that takes 5 days. It costs 5%. So it's kind of like the tariff no one's talking about in a way. And I subscribe to the Peterverse to full extent, but I do think that's inhibiting prosperity around the globe. And we think there's an opportunity to kind of rebuild that stack, right? We think that there are two things happening which make it possible. On one hand, global rollout of real-time payments. When I was in uni, I actually worked on SEPA Instant, kind of like European real-time payment rail, fiat real-time payment rail. And we thought back then this was still a hot take, that this was going to go global, right? And we're going to see every major economy rolling out their own real-time payment rail. And this is, I think, very much happening, right? With obviously the emerging market story, Pix Brazil, UPI India, and now in the States, now even maybe. And we think that's actually only going to continue, right? And we're going to have this ubiquity of local real-time payment rails. And then the second thing that's happening is that stable coins and digital assets kind of emerging as a regulated interoperability asset with the capacity to stitch these local real-time payment rates together, right? And we think that's kind of like the very immediate opportunity to just build faster and cheaper global payments. And yeah, so right now we're working with all kinds of default global companies, right? We work with big remittance companies, work with global PSPs. We are the de facto payments platform for the European crypto industry, right? So like a large chunk of European crypto volume flows for us, and we power global payments for these companies.
Okay.
And
tell me more about like the actual product you're building, where you sit in the stack, because I mean, like I've heard the international payments are hard, and they are, but at the same time, like I can pay people in other countries. Most payroll providers are set up for it. I've paid people in stable coins. It wasn't super easy, but it did exist. And, you know, there are stablecoin platforms that allow you to move money around. So it seems like at this point, some of the foundational layer is there. So I'm wondering, like, how do you fit into this?
I got to call out, John, you've spent your entire life as an entrepreneur mostly paying people, less getting, paid as like an international contractor, partner, vendor. And the lag time between when you hit pay,
I don't feel it.
You don't feel the pain because like you hit pay, the money maybe leaves the account. but then the person on the other end is sitting there kind of, waiting.
Okay.
And
So,
there's
yeah.
no reason. It's like
Yeah.
with the technology today, there's no reason for that to be the case.
Yeah,
It's just silly.
So I mean, break down the.
I mean,
break
even
down what you're building.
Swift, like honestly, I mean, even Swift works kind of well from the States to the emerging markets, right?
Sure.
So I think like it really gets tricky the other way around. Usually, is I think the reality of these flows are they are not as bidirectionally hard as people think. So if you're like in an emerging market, you want to send, you want to kind of like tap into dollar supply and send money into states, that gets really hard, right?
Yep.
And so I think there are still specific flows which are very much kind of like excluded from these trade opportunities. And I think where we sit in the stack and what we think is kind of like necessary to be built is we're very bare metal on the fiat side. Right. And so we really believe this is very much still like a fiat problem, and you got to be kind of deeply regulated and deeply connected to the fiat rates to kind of like precision engineer essentially a banking stack around digital assets. Right. And we think this, and there are many reasons for this, but this really makes it possible to kind of rebuild that whole kind of like Swift thing. Right. And make that work for both sides and on all kinds of flows.
Yeah. Because just technically, if I'm in some random country and I have the resources to mine Bitcoin and swap it into stable coins, like I can technically transfer it instantaneously today, but there might be gas fees and all sorts of different technical, and there's not any interoperability with the rest of the financial system, but it's like doable. So a lot of this is about the products that you're building around the existing rails. Is that correct? Or do you think you'll build like a new chain at some point? A new like L1.
Maybe follow me on Twitter and stay tuned.
Let's hear it. Let's go.
I think in reality right now we're building for businesses, right? And so I think like it's still there's a difference of like this rogue freelancer kind of like mining and swapping his Bitcoin and kind of being able to be a new kind of correspondent bank to other financial institutions. And these are 90% of the customers, right? Other financial institutions, PSPs, remittance companies, Web3 companies. And being a new kind of correspondent bank for these companies, I think you really got to rebuild the banking and fiat stack from ground up, right? And got to be really bare metal about it, and then kind of like rebuild it up from first principles with digital assets baked into it, right? And I think that's the kind of like institutional opportunity at hand here.
Yeah, John, you're not thinking big enough. You're over here thinking like, how do we move 10 grand? He's thinking, how do I move $10 billion a second?
Yep.
Every second of the day.
That's fair. That's fair. Talk to me about the different trade-offs between building and buying in different countries. I've seen a lot of companies that go out and buy a legacy bank to get a charter. Is that a relevant part of the strategy, or is that kind of antiquated? Can you get through the regulatory hurdles to get everything you need, or will you need to think about some end run around the regulation?
Yeah, it can be smart, right? We actually did this in Europe last summer. So we bought like a regulated institution,
there we go.
and that was actually a great project, right? Like, so that was like time to license was extremely fast, cost was extremely manageable, and overall like a positive experience. So I think I can recommend. In the States, I think there are a couple of things that are different. So that's a whole different story, and each market is kind of like. I think it's hard to generalize, but yes, I still see these things happening, and there's like rather liquid M&A market for regulated institutions that are being sold for the sake of being regulated and having the license transferred. Yeah,
makes sense. Anything else, Jordy?
Super exciting.
Fantastic.
We need those shirts.
We need this service because international advertisers are trying to transfer us billions of dollars for single ad reads, and
we can't be playing 5%.
Yeah, we say send the shipping container filled with cash right now, but I would love to just have it deposited instantaneously.
Where are you based, by the way? You said you're from Germany. Are you still living there? Or?
Yeah, I'm based in Berlin.
Cool.
So it's getting late here. Greetings.
Thanks for staying up.
And yeah, we will get the t-shirt sent. And we will help brand power all of the things that they currently are lacking for you guys.
Let's go.
There we go. There we go.
But that being said, good to see you guys.
Awesome.
Talk
Congratulations.
Bye.
Great talking.
Next up, we have Juan coming in to the studio. We're excited to keep this lightning round going. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Thiel fellows left for the day. And
they said it couldn't be done.
They said it couldn't be done.
Nobody believed.
Nobody believed.
Have some faith.
They said technology didn't need another podcast, and yet here we are. Welcome to the stream. How you doing? Juan.
Hey guys, how are you doing? Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Of course. Would you mind kicking it off with a little bit of an introduction on yourself and the company to get us started?
Absolutely. So I'm currently like the founder of Phase Labs. Phase Labs is a research lab that it's building that technology to regenerate complex organs directly in your body. So basically, imagine like imagine you lost a limb. Imagine you lost a limb, for example. You were like a warfighter. You went to the military. Maybe you suffer from diabetes and you had to be amputated. There's no way you could regenerate that right now.
No way.
You have to like rely on prosthetics, but prosthetics is kind of shit. Honestly. And this happens, if you look, this happens not only with limbs, but actually with all the rest of the organs of the body.
Sure.
So we're building that technology. That's kind of the glimpse of it.
How much of this is like, I mean, this is pure sci-fi, feels like. Is this informed by, what is it, the salamander that breaks the tail off and then they regrow it?
Back.
Is this like Jurassic Park where you actually learn something from that? Or is there a different...
Well, didn't we got Ozempic from some crazy dragon?
Yeah, the Komodo dragon
like so
or the Gila monster. What is basically I want to know, trace back for me the tech tree that got us to today. I imagine you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Is CRISPR relevant? Like, what is relevant to allow you to do this? Because this sounds like pure sci-fi to me.
Yeah, so I will start with that last line, like the CRISPR line, because I think that's extremely important. We are not doing genetic engineering. And that has advantages from regulatory point of view, but also like on the underlying R&D. I actually, and this might be controversial, but I actually don't think that you can solve this problem with genetic engineering. Like finding 1, 2, 3 genes that you can basically crack the problem. I don't think that's possible at all. We are basically modifying the physiological signals directly in the body. More specifically, we're leveraging electrophysiological signals. So a lot of people doesn't know, but the same signals that rule your brains actually are all over your body. Basically, when you were born, you were a single zygote. And literally that zygote self-assembled yourself into a living, human, functioning being. So
let's give it up for the zygotes.
Let's give it up for them. This is fantastic.
So basically what we have discovered, and this is work of the last 15, 20 years, is that these electrophysiological signals during the process of development encode information, instructive information to control morphogenesis, which is the process of growth and form of an organism. So yeah, definitely we are like on the shoulders of giants. That's a fact, yeah.
Regrowing a hand, that seems like the final boss of this potentially. What's the easiest thing to regrow? Are you starting with like a fingernail and then you work your way up, or do you go for the hand straight out and try to one-shot that? Like, is there something that we already regrow that we can maybe build on? Yeah, hair. Hey, we know the hair loss market. Maybe you should pivot into just hair loss. There seems to be a lot of money in that.
That would be extremely profitable, honestly. Yeah. Just as a matter of fact, I mean, human babies are able to regrow the tip of their fingers, of their digits.
If something happens,
once, like they are young. Yeah, that already happens.
That's
what
remarkable.
happens is that like the human body lose this capacity throughout time, throughout aging. And now, like regarding the question, what is the final what is the final boss? I actually think the kidney, it's even anatomically speaking, it's even more complex than the limb. But the limb is right up there. Like these these two indications will be kind of in the next 10, 15 years. These are kind of long-term research programs. On the short term, we're focusing on indications where we could basically move a lot faster in the next 5 years. So for example, chronic wound healing. This happens to diabetic patients when they suffer from ulcers, and it's actually the main cause of amputations worldwide. So we are basically cracking these initial problems first. Yeah.
What about even something like scar tissue? Like a lot of people have like C-section scars or scars from anything. Is that relevant or like the same kind of biological process, or is that a different fork of the tech tree?
Yeah, actually, it's pretty similar. It's based on the same electrochemical signals in the regenerative process. So if you look, there are already in the market electric wound dressings that you actually can put in the skin and accelerate the wound process. But these are extremely limited to a stage 2 and stage 1 injuries. So for example, if you have like an injury of 5 millimeters, but once you start like involving like 1-2 centimeters, it starts to be incredibly more complex. You touch muscle, you touch bones, so that's a lot harder. Yeah.
Got
for
it.
these tech.
What's exciting about what's happening in the I saw some recent news around a genetically edited pig kidney that was transferred into a human, and it sounds like it was somewhat effective. Is there anything that you guys can learn? Just immediately, my reaction to that is like, I would rather have a regular human kidney that was generated just for me instead of a genetically edited pig kidney that gets sort of transplanted in. But what are you learning from that space or tracking?
Yeah, I think those initiatives. I mean, any initiative that tries to crack the problem, it's worthwhile. But I'm quite skeptical with those approaches, because there are a lot of questions regarding the immune system. How much, like, what would be the rejection of a human body in these cases? Like the immunogenicity of the related process, it's like a huge question mark. And I actually think that if we want to solve the regenerative problem, not only like one organ, but like actual regeneration, whole body regeneration, like Deadpool or Wolverine, for example, we actually need to leverage the fundamental mechanisms that the body already uses. So go there, understand what is the language, what is the code that the body uses for morphogenesis, and learn to modulate that code, like more fundamentally. I think that's important.
What's the user experience? You've been mentioning like electrostimulation. Is this not a pill that I take?
Yeah, so there's a continuum of technology, and this is important. So for the limb regeneration, the stimulation will be a lot more complex than just like electric currents. Of course, it's an anatomical structure that it's a lot more complex. But starting like with the chronic wound healing, with the short-term research program, we are working with a medical device approach in mind. Why? Because medical devices are a lot easier to pass through the FDA, do clinical trials on top of them. Once you start with biologics, they are extremely hard. So we want to accelerate that process first. And then I think that the ideal version of this technology is kind of a combination product, where you use deep biophysical stimulation with light and ultrasound, but also leverage kind of the molecular specificity of proteins at the same time. Yeah.
If you're successful, as you sound like you're going to be, what is the craziest potential future that you could imagine? Are we regenerating entire versions of ourselves?
I want extra arms. Make me like Doc Ock.
Yeah.
I want six. From Spider-Man, I want 6 arms.
What's the craziest potential?
You could potentially skip leg day technology and regrow your leg muscles. Can you imagine that?
John would love this.
Just massive quads without ever hitting the leg press. The world would change overnight.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. One important. Yeah, I think there are two variants of like a really optimistic, crazy future. The first one, I think it's more like a cultural change. We have like this idea that Thiel, that if you like you are able to edit yourself with maybe a hand, a robotic arm, and you are kind of a blend of robotic human person, like somehow you will be stronger. But that, I mean, that's just a bias that we have because we have not been able to engineer biology like successfully as we wanted. I would love like for humans to understand that biology could be as robust as any other thing, and even start relating this technology to aging itself. And of course, there's still like a gap in which that we should answer that, to what extent regenerating all the organs of your body would be related to aging and increasing longevity. But I think we have big reasons to believe that it will be high connected. So basically expand like the lifespan of people like 100 years more, to be able to be more productive, have like healthier lives, change our societal construct of what is a meaningful life would be amazing. And then on the limit, it will be also awesome. It would be extremely awesome to be able to engineer like artificial biological networks in the same way that we are doing right now with artificial neural networks in AI. So basically constructs, biobots that can go out there and solve all sorts of problems for us. I think that would be amazing as well.
That is
biobots.
amazing. I love it.
It's programmed.
Congratulations, and thanks for breaking it down for us.
Yeah, this is super exciting.
It's a lot.
I'm very
It's a lot to
excited
process. Honestly.
yeah.
It's not a simple business. This is amazing, though.
I'm very excited.
It is.
But yeah,
follow
I
the
mean, we
journey.
could do a whole hour on this. So yeah, we'll have to have you back. This is fantastic. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye. Next up, we have Jennifer Lin. Excited to talk to her. And we ran through all our ads. Should we just start back at the beginning? Tell you about Ramp, time is money, save both. Easy to use corporate cards, bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more, all in one place. Go to ramp.com to get started. Ramp. Let's bring in Jennifer. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing?
Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for taking the time. How are you doing?
It's great to have you.
Oh, I think we have you on mute. I don't know if it's a problem on our side or your side. We are good. Would you mind trying again?
Both. I think you can hear me now.
We can
Yes.
hear you. Welcome to the show. Would you mind kicking it off with an introduction on yourself and the company?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm Jennifer, and my company, AUG, we focus on solving the access problem in rare disease. So there's a large amount of drugs in rare disease that are already effective or potentially effective for the patient. It's been tried by a doctor in maybe 1 or 2 patients. They wrote up a study saying that, there's been some efficacy here, but the rest of the rare disease patients don't get access. So I'm really working on a drug development company to develop these drugs that already work for rare disease patients that need it.
Interesting. There was a little bit of a debate on the show last week between 2 guests who were arguing over the idea of how the FDA decides to approve drugs, whether the benchmark is better than a placebo, better than nothing, or better than the standard of care. How do you see the FDA's mandate in drug development? What is their goal? Are they trying to protect certain IP structures by limiting the access to drugs, or is it more purely based on safety and efficacy broadly?
Yeah, I think, so we've had conversations with the FDA, and at the end of the day, the FDA is really a group of people trying their best to approve drugs that work, and then, reject drugs that might have safety issues or are the same as placebo. So for us working in rare disease, a lot of the times we are up against placebo or even historical controls, because there's usually no approved treatment in these specific diseases. So it's much easier to get a drug approved there versus if you work in, cancer, which is very common, like breast cancer. There's already so many drugs that are approved and effective that you have to run really long trials against drugs that already work. And that ends up being extremely costly, extremely expensive. And there's some debate about, is there a way to get around this 5-6 year trial?
Yeah, I've seen some biotech companies that will go and they'll pick up a dead asset, like a drug that maybe didn't make it through phase 3, and then they kind of repackage it, IPO the company, and then everyone's kind of betting on, maybe they can get it through phase 3 now. Is that a piece of your strategy, or do you think you'll be taking like a completely different approach?
Yeah, so what we typically do is whenever a drug works for patients, there's so many reasons why they don't have access. One could be the formulation that works is just so much higher, and they need a special drug company to come in and formulate it so that it's stable, or it's available as an injection and patients need it as an eye drop, and so on. So a lot of what we do is we take an existing drug and we basically provide it in the formulation that's actually accurate and effective for these patients. But yeah, like repurposing old drugs is a great strategy because you have safety usually already established for patients. Now you just have to work on making sure that it's like a drug that works.
Yeah. Do you see a piece of the business being partnering with big pharmaceutical companies or drug companies that already have something like that. It's a shot and they want it to be an eye drop and you come in as a partner to them? Or is there a completely different pathway? Because I imagine, hey, if I own the patent on this drug as a shot, I'm not just going to let you take it and turn it into an eye drop for free and make all the money. So how does the business partnership work, as we probably want to compensate the scientist who actually created the shot, even though you're going to do a lot of hard work to make the eye drop version?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this. We've thought about partnering before, and we've done a lot of conversations with top 5 pharma. And what they say usually is cash is king. So for them, like upfront is really important. Regardless of indication, you need to produce X amount of cash to, license this asset and take it forward. So we've taken an alternative approach, which is there are so many drugs right now that are off patent. So their effective life in a larger indication like autoimmune disease, so on, has already expired. Big Pharma's already made that much money. And now this drug is, available for very cheap. And typically what we do is now we take this already invented drug and we add on something that makes it the right fit for rare disease patients.
What areas of biotech and drug development right now are most exciting to you? We've obviously seen like a huge boom in GLP-1s. CRISPR has been exciting for years and continues to be exciting in many ways. But there are other pockets of drugs that people are working on. Where do you see kind of the most low-hanging fruit in terms of what you do, bringing access to drugs in different categories versus what's the next thing?
Yeah, so low-hanging fruit, and also what's the next moonshot? It's a great question. For us, low-hanging fruit is we follow FDA guidances very closely. So they just recently released a guidance that certain biologic drugs, antibodies, don't have to go after as much animal testing. You can leverage a lot of human clinical trials, which is like almost incorporating common sense, right? Yeah. Like if it's safe in humans, then maybe we don't have to do a 24-week, mice tox study. So like the antibody biologic space is really interesting because of the amount of studies you might be able to skip if your drug's already safe. And in the moonshot area, completely unrelated to rare disease, but longevity is very interesting. If there's a lot of discourse about can we actually develop the first real drug to prevent aging, to reduce the aging process. And I think if you can be the first to market in such an insanely large market, everybody's aging, everybody would like some sort of drug to stay healthier for longer. That's an incredibly exciting space to be in.
Yeah, we talked to the founder of New Limit and we both came away extremely bullish on that category.
Like, please. Yeah. Just make it work. I'm curious, how do pricing models differ in sort of rare, for therapeutics in the rare disease space, given that the actual market size, I'm assuming things are a lot more expensive just because markets are smaller, but maybe that's the incorrect read.
Yeah, it really depends. And when you talk about pricing, there's also this overall, you're taking into account all the insurance payers that exist in the US. So there are drugs that insurance payers will have pushback on. And typically that's drugs for really, really large indications. For example, longevity maybe. Alzheimer's, where there's such a large amount of patients, even if you charge them $10,000 per year to the insurer, that's hundreds of billions of dollars that they won't be able to really bear for a new drug. Whereas for rare disease, if you have 10,000 patients and you're charging $100K per year, that's actually still a negligible amount spread out amongst all the different payers in the US. So typically those conversations actually go pretty smoothly for rare disease, where you say we have a really large impact on this patient and there's only so few patients.
That's cool. Seems
Very
like
cool.
It's working. One part of healthcare that's working well.
It's great. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This was really fun. We'd love to have you back and get an update when you have more news.
Yeah, congratulations on joining the fellowship as well.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Next up, we have Teddy Warner coming into the studio. While we get him queued up, let me tell you about Figma. Think bigger, build faster. Figma helps design and development teams build great products together. You can get started for free. Go to figma.com. It's a fantastic product. Jordy's addicted. He's a Figma addict. He can't stop using Figma. He designs endless slide decks in it. Our beautiful website, tbpn.com, was designed in Figma. We've actually experimented. The entire overlay that you've seen, this is all from Figma and then gets baked into our production software, which we don't talk about because it's our secret. It's our secret sauce. Anyway, welcome to the stream, Teddy. Good to have you here. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Thanks for having me. I heard y'all are in a new studio, which is
we are.
exciting.
This is the first day. We have a giant
the first
gong.
day. Yeah, it's an honor.
We're christening it with Thiel Fellow Tuesday. We're very excited to have you here.
They said it couldn't happen.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself? Break us down. What are you building? How'd you get there? Where'd you grow up? Give me the whole thing.
I'm Teddy from North Carolina.
Cool.
I used to work in a makerspace and a machine shop. This is my technical baseline. One way or another, found myself in California, worked at Midjourney in a past life. Now I run a robotics lab called Intempus.
This is so funny about the Thiel Fellowship, really quickly. Like, the whole idea is like dropping out of college, and Jordy was making this joke that like, the Thiel Fellowship has a combined, 5 years of work experience because like no one's supposed to have worked, and it's like a joke that every startup's like, well, you have 20 years of management experience combined. But like most of you that we've talked to have years of experience somehow. So were you working and going to school? Like, how did you work at Midjourney while not have like dropping out yet?
If you want the very abridged Teddy timeline, is I grew up in North Carolina, worked in this machine shop in this makerspace for about 4 years. Somehow wound up in biotech. Cool. I was doing manufacturing for invasive electrodes for chronically ill children. So everything from EEG to ECG electrodes.
Very cool.
Just an engineer. Discovered I was actually like exceedingly squeamish. And so on a whim, went to university in LA at USC for about a year. Studied art.
Jordy's back.
I'm back. I had to hit the air horn.
How's it going?
For SC.
Yeah, let's go.
We love USC. Had a total blast. Studied art and technology and a bit of business and some film and the whole shebang. I know when you go to California, you get pretty caught up in the culture. And so unsurprisingly, I started a venture. Wound up meeting Midjourney David through this venture, which is how I wound up at Midjourney.
Very cool.
About a year ago now.
Nice.
Left 9 months ago. Now I run a robotics lab called Intempus. I make robots expressive. Robots currently suck at communicating what they're doing. They're really hard to understand. You have to pay expensive nerds like me to come use the command line anytime you're trying to understand what they're up to. And so I make them communicate like every other mammal and like every other human. Such that you can interact with a robot even though you don't speak its language.
What are we talking about robots?
I felt like it was pretty easy, that robot that was like on a stand. Like
flailing around, killing everyone.
That was pretty easy to understand.
Some of it's telltale.
I mean, are we talking about like industrial robots, like KUKA arms and stuff, or are we talking Roombas or the future humanoid robots? Like, what's the first product that you think what's the first robot that really needs humanization?
Sure. I mean, as you can tell, like robots is probably the largest umbrella term that we have. It spans from humanoids to like glorified Roombas and everything in between. So how do you make them expressive? Well, I think it's quite telltale if I have an anthropomorphic robot, like a humanoid. I can say, oh, it waves, or oh, it smiles or moves around, and this makes sense. But Intempus focuses on non-anthropomorphic robots, specifically the ones that already exist. So where do robots exist? They exist in industry. Yeah, robots work great in industry. 99% of the time, they work wonderfully. Like if you think about an Amazon warehouse, there's a bunch of little Roombas that roll around and move the carts and stuff. And on occasion, probably 1% of the time, these robots fail. And they hardly ever fail for technically complex reasons. Usually robots fail for some trivial reason. Say, Jordy's in an Amazon warehouse and there's a Roomba trying to pass him and it gets stuck because Jordy's in his way. So the Roomba, the robot in the warehouse just fails and it leaves a fail code in the command line and it moves on and does something else. And what Intempus does is we allow these robots to be expressive. We allow them to convey their intent to people like Jordy, in this case, who would not otherwise understand what the robot is trying to do. So what if this robot, upon
Cool,
seeing
dude.
Jordan's
I'm
path,
non-technical.
nippy?
I'm non-technical. Just really,
not a shot.
just put me down.
If
No,
you
I'm kidding.
see,
I'm kidding.
if you see a robot like getting nippy with you, like a small dog, it's like, oh shit, I should probably move out of the robot's way. And so you can save a bunch of money on debug costs, and also reduce downtime of robots just by allowing them to communicate what they're up to. And in the future, of course, we'll get into consumer and service and humanoids, but right now it's all in industry.
Awesome. I mean, you gave the example of Amazon. They acquired Kiva Systems in 2017, 8 years now. I'm sure they're thinking about this. Is Amazon the right customer for you, or do you want to start kind of in the more mid-market, or do you want to be more, product-led growth, developer-led growth, hackers, get into like the next generation of robotics companies? What's the go-to-market look like?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts here. I mean, so in Tempest's initial customer base are all enterprise robotics manufacturers. They're people who sell the robots to Amazon.
Yep.
And seemingly everyone is vertically integrating in this policy space. I think it's hardly prophetic for me to say that we're going to have a lot of robots in the future, whether it be in industry or in service or in consumer, and that these robots are going to have to interact with humans. And it's quite shocking that, not many people are focused on the interaction layer, how humans and robots are going to interact. Instead, they're focused on making robots functional. Yeah. And so I'd love if more players like Amazon and big players would get into this space. I want you guys to imagine, like, say you're walking down Hollywood to the office in 10 years from now, and you pass by 20 robots. And one robot is running an Amazon model, and one is running an Tempest model, and one is running a Tesla model. This is like the same experience as going to talk with, like walking down the street and chatting with a Nigerian, and then a Canadian, and then a Lithuanian. There's 3 different languages, 3 different dialects, 3 different humors. It's a terrible user experience. And so it's seemingly very important that we figure out one standardized means of human-robot interaction. And the way that I'm proliferating into this space is through the enterprise manufacturers that are selling robots to big companies, to small companies. As long as there's a scalable impact, I'll work with them.
Cool.
How influenced are you by movies like WALL-E, right? The sort of the fun robot. It feels like you want robots to be doing serious work, but have it be sort of enjoyable to interact with them. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big Interstellar fan.
Yeah, TARS, great robot.
TARS is killer. TARS is killer. There's one scene in Interstellar where Cooper sets TARS humor level or truth level to like 90%.
90%, yeah.
One of the tricks like behind making robots expressive is giving them emotions, because what are you expressing? Well, you're expressing emotions. Yeah. And you can view all of these as scalars. Yeah. And so I can give robots a 90% humor level or a 90% joy level. Yeah. And so it's pretty cool. Like it was shocking to me how on point TARS is. There's a whole bunch of like interesting media that came out of the creation of Interstellars on how they simultaneously made TARS. He's a cold ex-military robot, and yet also Cooper's best friend. Yep. And so this is absolutely the intention.
Fantastic. Talk to me about the tech stack. I imagine that you mentioned command lines. Are you doing post-training on a foundation model? Are you using Llama, open source stuff? Like how do you actually solve the technical problem? What is deeper in the supply chain of your tech stack?
So as I mentioned earlier, like seemingly everyone is focused on vertically integrating control policy. All the big companies are doing this, and you get big horizontal companies that are awesome, like physical intelligence. Yep. And I really don't want to compete with these people. In fact, I want to work with them. Yep. And so when I initially put my mind to how do I construct this architecture, I had to say like, okay, I absolutely need to be an augmentation atop the transformer layer. So after a robot is told what to do by its decision transformer, I run this interaction layer. Now, I want you guys have both heard the phrase time flies when you're having fun.
Of course.
This is like a pretty integral way in which humans perceive the world. The inverse is also true. Your perception of time moves slower when you're stressed. And so we have fun and stress to emotions, and they change how we perceive the world subjectively. And so what Tempest does, we equip these things called time constants. The question is like, time flies when you're having fun. What is time for a robot? Well, time is compute. So what if you could allocate compute such that when a robot is having fun, or when it's not needed to do any like daunting task, it can use the minimum amount of compute necessary. It can move as quickly as possible. But when a robot is stressed, and it's failing, it should use more compute to collect more data so we can train and squash the edge case, and B, convey why it fails to, again, people in factories and people that would otherwise not understand what the robot is trying to do.
Yeah, and that aligns with like test time inference scaling rules right now, where you want to do more reasoning for harder problems. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anything else, Jordy? Are we good?
I think we're good, but come back on again soon, Teddy.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
This is
Thanks
super
for having me,
exciting,
guys.
Yeah.
and I look forward to interacting, speaking the Intempest language with many robots throughout my life.
Me too. We'll talk
Glad
to
to
you
hear
soon.
it.
Have a good
Yeah,
one.
take
Cheers,
care.
dude.
Bye. Next up, we have Sigil, founder of Extraordinary, coming on the stream. Very excited to have him. I gotta say, these Thiel fellows pretty punctual. We
They're
haven't had
so- I was about
anyone
to say
running
this.
late. This is a very crazy thing. You get this calendar invite, you just hop on the stream, but he's here right on
It's
time.
that weird time.
It's amazing.
Hey,
I'm gonna
join
let
at
you do the intro. I will
1:42.
be right back.
Sigil, great to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. It's been a super fun day so far. The class is absolutely stacked, and congrats on making it in. Why don't you start with a bit of backstory, your personal story, and then what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm Joel, the founder of Extraordinary.com. We are the extraordinary talent company of America.
Love
If you
it.
Google O1 Visa for extraordinary ability, you'll find my face as the cover image.
There we
And
go.
I'm the guy going around giving out these Alien of Extraordinary Ability hoodies that you see on your X feed.
Amazing. Talk about your personal journey to kind of building this company.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I built this project that was, I think he did like 100K in revenue this first month. And I used the funds to pay someone to finish high school for me. And
There
I
we
flew
go.
to San Francisco. And I came here on a tourist visa. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I'm like, holy shit, these people are these people are incredibly ambitious. I have to stay here. And if you don't go to college, at the time I originally got into the M&T program at the University of Pennsylvania. I decided to opt out because I was pretty stubborn. I really just wanted to be in Silicon Valley. And the
Yep.
only visa options was the O1 for extraordinary ability. And this is what the US government calls it. And at the time, this was probably 3 years ago, it wasn't as proliferated. The one person I knew was Patrick Collison who had that. I couldn't
Wow.
get a TN visa or the H-1B because you needed a degree. So I had to go for the O1. And I hunted down every single person in Silicon Valley that had the O1 visa, tried to understand what could qualify. And after 8 months with an immigration lawyer, I filed it. It was sponsored by Naval. I built this company with him, and I was approved at
Amazing.
20. And I was like, holy shit, it's so hard for the world's best talent to come here. It's so unintuitive. And I made a YouTube video about the process that has been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. And um, I made this this hoodie
That's
during
amazing.
as merch for that YouTube video. So, and that kind of took off.
What are the
Amazing.
overall trends in the O1 visas? It feels like, I mean, like immigration's obviously complicated, but it feels like all the stars align for like everyone being like O1s are great. Elon has come out and said he loves O1s, and like it feels like it's aligned with American values and freedom and like brain drain and even strategic stuff. Like there's a lot of pro. Are the number of O1s increasing? Is this a new program? Can you give us like a little bit of like history and trajectory for the O1 program broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that the O1 was created for the Manhattan Project. I think it's that ethos.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact origins, but it's been around, and it's been used to. The premise of it is that you're an individual who has risen to the top of your field. I like to say you're like the top 0.1 percentile at what you do. And USCIS has these 8 criteria to adhere towards. You can be a tattoo artist, you could be a chip designer, you could be the founder of the fastest growing AI company who
That's
I'm
amazing.
currently helping out.
That's great.
As long as you can prove that you are extraordinary at what you do, you can get it. And I think for the longest time it's very unclear, because when you go to the website, it's like examples. You have a Nobel Prize or like whichever. And the way this company came to be was I literally mapped down 500 people who have O1s and EB1s for extraordinary ability. I gave them these hoodies. I actually built a website and just compiled them in terms of like their stories and like how they came to America. And I think that because of that, more and more people have been applying for it. There's no cap to it. As long as you meet their bar and convince USCIS that you're extraordinary, you can get it. And so I think it's very positive sum of the visa.
Yeah. So what is the process actually like? I imagine that there's a lot of paperwork and lawyers and cost stuff that's, tailor made for LLM automation and just normal SaaS apps and stuff and form filling. What are the headaches that O1 recipients typically report as particularly painful?
I mean, my process took 8 months. It cost me more than $10,000.
Wow.
I mean, you gotta keep in mind what is the end product? I have a printer here. You're literally printing 500 pages of paper, like with a bunch of citations to all evidence. You might have heard like there's recommendation letters too, which you got to go chase down people and be like, hey, can you please vouch for me being in America? I think I can contribute to this economy.
One-shotted by a ChatGPT from now on. You can imagine.
So many M dashes. There's thousands of M dashes.
Let's delve into why he should be a O1. I'm sure that's happening.
That got shipped off to like USCIS, Texas. They still break open the box and then scan it, which is like super archaic.
Wow. They don't even accept like a PDF.
No, they don't. So I have to ship it through FedEx and then receive it, and then they parse
and then they scan it.
Yeah, and then some like
scan it. Wow.
Very efficient.
High school diploma just adjudicates whether you're extraordinary.
Okay.
Well, we're big fans of paper, but even that.
Even that's my stretch.
What how have you thought about the business model for extraordinary? It feels like there's some immediate, probably upfront value that you can capture and just making this process less painless. But when you think about taking somebody at the absolute top of their field and bringing them to the best economy in the world where they're going to attract other talent and capital and things like that, it feels like a lot of the value creation is on the things that they.
I mean, the obvious business model here is to sell the data to venture capital firms.
Yes.
Which I feel like might already be happening, judging by the involvement of Naval.
I mean,
what's the actual business model? Jokes aside.
Yeah, so I'm tempted to rename the company to the Extraordinary Talent Company of America. Our flagship first product, obviously, just making this much more seamless and faster. Like, I think it should be a standard deviation of speed up, which already is. We already power ramp, cognition, and we work with a ton of top founders building companies that we know, and we should see a lot more of that on our X feeds coming along. I mean, look, you can make a good amount from providing the best product and serving these great talent to relocate here on the visa basis, but where I want to take things, like I don't actually view this ultimately as a visa filing company. I think it's an extraordinary talent company, and if you look at the life cycle of extraordinary talent, like someone who's, I don't know, like a senior engineer who's shipped like 60% of Devon. I just filed that O1 case actually, right? Like the whole life cycle of them, one being like placed at their company all the way to how they even relocate there. Like most of the value capture isn't actually that like visa filing. And I think also AI is gonna eat away at margins in terms of services across all technology companies. And so then like what can you build that has network effects, that has innate distribution, that can just attract the world's best talent? Like I want to build something where if you're remotely ambitious and talented, you have a means to be discovered. And if you remotely want to come here, like you're going to be on extraordinary.com.
Cool. How do you think about giving people an opportunity to get to America without having credentials yet, right? Like presumably there's somebody out in the world who's 16 years old, they're in some like high school type situation, and they actually could be one of the world's best programmers or something like that, but maybe they haven't gotten a job. Is there a world in the future where you would create sort of like open testing where people could kind of like prove their abilities? I'm sure somebody would figure out how to hack it pretty quickly, but how do you think about kind of creating the ability for people to prove their capabilities prior to getting the ability to get traditional credentials?
Yeah, first off, I actually got a 16-year-old approved for an O1 visa a few weeks ago.
What are they extraordinary at?
Interaction design for
Roblox.
Amazing.
The most elite Roblox player.
And On the talent discovery front, um, I think that the way that we value talent is evolving. I mean, right now, like it's so funny. Like there's Mercor, but then the founder of Cluely is like building software that hacks the Mercor interviews,
Oh
which
yeah, I
you
hadn't
think
thought
the
about that.
proxies for measuring talent are just like falling through completely. Thanks
Yeah,
for.
it's hilarious.
And so, like, how do you then measure talent in this new age where, we value people who are able to leverage AI much more? And I think the way that companies hire will evolve, and we need to account for that. We need ways of assessing people, but also discovering people to showcase just how like competent they are. And I'm a very big believer of being able to give those means to people around the world, regardless of their traditional accolades, and just being able to empower people who have the merit and who have the ability, and they should be discovered and sponsored to come to America.
It's
Awesome.
amazing.
Well, congratulations on getting into the Thiel Fellowship.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there will be many Thiel Fellows in the future that go through your program.
Yeah,
Very
are already
exciting.
helping them.
I'm excited for the first O1 bodybuilder. We saw what happened with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he came to America, had a fantastic impact outside of bodybuilding.
Went on to be the governor of California.
Governor of California. Pretty good one.
So don't count out the bodybuilders.
So let's just get all the elite bodybuilders from all over the world, bring them here on O1s. That's my goal.
As long as you're the top at what you do, we help you.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for coming on.
We'll talk
Congrats.
to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye. Next up, what?
Just Gold's Gym in Venice just has
love it.
hundreds of new
O1s.
members that are all
America is
on O1s.
already dominant in bodybuilding. We hold more than 50% of the Mr. Olympias, but we could be doing even better if we
always do
brought
better.
everyone from all over the world who's elite at bodybuilding to America, which is my dream. Anyway, our next guest is here. We have Aiden Smith, founder of Interphases. Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Boom.
Howdy, I'm doing really well. How are y'all?
We're great.
It's great to have you on.
Would you mind kicking us off with a little introduction on yourself and the company you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to understand my life is kind of framed at this realization I had when I was a little tiny kid in like 4th grade. I was sitting in this classroom and I was watching some guy doing real science, and I saw him and I was like, dang, I like know how to do addition. I know how to do basic algebra, and like, where the hell am I going with my life? And I realized that the world is a really scary competitive place, and I had to have some kind of heuristic by which I should get better. And so I thought to myself, all right, every 2 years, I want to double in the metrics I care about, which at 4th grade was coolness. And so at that point, growing up in the South Bay, I grew up to exceptionally chill parents, an opera singer and electrical engineer who were just like, oh, son, just do whatever you want to do. And I was like, okay, every 2 years, I will double in coolness. And so that's exactly kind of how I structured my life. And in the next 2 years, I did stuff like tried to memorize a dictionary because this is what I thought cool was when I was like
That's
10
pretty
years
cool.
That's
But
extremely cool.
eventually, the coolness actually went in a direction of like things that were actually pretty cool. Like
Okay.
when I was in high school, I started working at chess.com and I like delivered tons and tons of features and made some really cool products that were really impactful to me. And when I was in college, I was like, okay, what's the coolest problem you could possibly work on? And I ended up working at Neuralink, where I'm currently
Amazing.
seated. Sorry to any coworkers who are seeing me taking this meeting.
Never apologize.
But
for
what
podcasting.
about like joining a punk band, learning to do a kickflip? Did that ever come into the cool factor?
Believe me, I do all of these things. I
you
play
do?
electric guitar.
Oh,
I
nice. There
really
we
into
go.
Mycology, so I have a lot of mushrooms memorized throughout the Sierra Nevada.
Okay,
In general,
very
these are the
cool.
things that fit my heuristic. for
Legend.
cool.
Okay, yeah.
Legend.
That makes sense.
Then
But
you
not the
think-
cliche cool guy. Like you're not
Well,
you're not driving
give me
us.
a couple years. That's
You're
what I'm
just
telling you.
You're just leveling
Yeah.
up. You're maxing out your character.
Yeah. The red Ferrari convertible that comes next year when there's another doubling in the cool factor.
The doubling. People are going to start tracking the
Yeah.
doubling, like the Bitcoin. you
The
know.
halving.
I want to make a
doublings.
poly market is the real thing.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
see if I
yeah.
can stay on track.
This is amazing.
But,
So you've been working at Neuralink. What are you working on now?
Yeah, so at Neuralink, I've been doing all kinds of really cool things. And
Mhm.
one of these things I've been doing most recently is I'm leading the sound speech project, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the study that was announced fairly recently, so I can talk about this a little bit. But basically, there's a really great corpus of interesting literature that goes from how do you get from inside your head to outside your head.
Mhm.
This is super, super profound technology. Imagine if you have ALS and you're locked in or something like this.
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time around these people, and every minute I spend with them, I think more to myself that like these people need to be able to communicate to the outside world better.
Yeah.
And Neuralink is doing a really great job of this kind of thing. I have so much confidence in the team. I have so much confidence that this technology is going to be transformative. But also, I really hope I don't get ALS anytime soon. I really hope I don't have a brainstem stroke or something that keeps me from being able to communicate sanely. And I still am interested in the way this technology will go on to transform other parts of the world.
Sure.
And so with interfaces, what I'm looking at is I see all these kind of gizmos for AI. I see these like limitless pendants. I see these smartwatches and things that are trying to kind of integrate all this data. And I don't fully buy it. The reason why I don't is because I actually don't like voice as a medium that much for most things. If it actually wants to integrate into your life effortlessly, I don't want to be in the middle of a conversation with you and be like, what's the guy on the left's name? It's super awkward. It's terrible. So how do you do better? And there's a couple ways you can think about this. One, former coworker of mine, a guy I really respect, Bliss, who you may have seen on Twitter or whatever, has told me that there's a couple ways you can get value out of machine learning. And one of them is kind of just arbitrage via data, and another is arbitrage via time. And so if you have these longer time series, you can kind of get more bits out of them by just increasing your confidence intervals, either by doing these kind of causal estimates or acausal estimates where you have understanding of what's going on in the future as well as in the past. And so you can kind of use this to do sane updates, or just by looking for signals that are kind of strong over a long period of time. And I think that with this in mind, there's kind of room for this halfway horse between like a conventional microphone, which can pick up stuff in real time and do transcription in real time, and an EA or someone who actually will kind of try to predict what the heck you're doing in space. And so what you can imagine is building a device that basically takes these like fundamentally pretty crappy signals, like MEG signals, for example.
What are those? Sorry, NEG signals?
Yeah. There's many ways in which signals are propagated through the body to move your arms or to create electrical activity.
Sure.
You may have seen a recent paper out of Reality Labs and Meta where they use exactly this to kind of
for the Orion headset, they bought that company. I forget what it's called, but they bought a company like 6 years ago, and they're finally implementing it, right?
Yeah, and it's extremely cool. A friend of mine went to one of their clinical trials and put the thing on, and you try it out. You say, look, I'm pinching my fingers, and the fingers pinch, and it's pretty magical. This is the kind of thing which normally you would have to cut a hole in your head to do, but you don't necessarily have to do here.
Sure.
And there's a really good story to be told about kind of doing this for speech and getting really terrible speech. I have no illusions as a neurotechnologist that you will get really terrible speech out of this. But the key thing is that this does not matter because the context is what matters. And by informing this really awful speech on the context of what's around you and like your intention in the situation, you may be able to actually get the underlying part of it that matters. And so in fact, indeed, even if I can only kind of pick up the word left and guy, I might know that I want to know who's the guy on the left.
And that's an easy LLM transformer problem, right? So you get a big bag of words, it's very messy, but it's enough to turn into a semblance of a thought that could be confirmed with a pinch, maybe.
Yeah. Now, ideally, at least in my eyes, you have this just totally effortlessly into your life, and you kind of collect this data all the time via a method that's fairly subtle. I have a little bit of alpha here that I won't spill, so you'll have to have me on in a couple months to see my fun demos. But of how to get this data, so you're constantly collecting this, and it's constantly informing and improving on how you interact with the world. In general, I really care about efficiency in whatever I do, and lots of little things in your day-to-day life are super inefficient in these pretty funny ways, and I think that by kind of having this compute that is always acting in a way that doesn't invade the privacy of other people, like I want to understand myself better. I want to be able to improve myself. I want to be able to like keep on that doubling path without like constantly listening to you guys or to my friends or to the coworkers or whoever else is around me. And I want to have the data set to do that. So there's this kind of dual pronged thing of like, okay, actually create the better interface to interact with LMs and to build the like higher bit rate communication interfaces and also get a better model for oneself.
I had this idea in college that got my wisdom teeth out, and I was like, I want them to put a microphone in the hole there, because then I could whisper, who's the guy on the left? And it wouldn't be picked up to anyone else, but it'd be able to pick up the audio. But I think that's probably gross and kind of a part of the tech tree we don't even need to go down, because we can just leapfrog that whole step.
We've already gone down it. I had to break it to you. There's this Israeli company called Moller that does exactly this for military
really?
application.
No way.
Yeah, you can imagine that like you have bombs going off around you and you're like, boss, we need backup. But you can't hear that over the crazy loud sound of artillery.
Moller mic, no
Moller
way.
mics. We need that.
Is it a good company? Did they do okay?
I have no idea. But
okay, I got to
Ben's always telling me, our producer's always telling us to move the mic.
Talk closer to the microphone.
Closer to the mic, but I could just have a Moller mic.
Yeah, we need to be augmented for sure. What are you going into a similar FDA pathway as Neuralink? Is that how things are going to play out for you?
Yeah, so I'd like to avoid this if possible. I do think that there's room for a device that's somewhere in between, like this really groundbreaking, first-in-class biomedical device, which involves a lot of risk. I mean, fundamentally, invasive neurosurgery involves a lot of risk. Even when you're doing it with the very best surgeons in the world, with these robots that can avoid vasculature with everything, there's still some risk priced in there. And so I think, again, there's this halfway horse thing of like, okay, maybe it's invasive, but maybe it's not quite as risky of a thing. Maybe it's more like getting like an implant for birth control, or more like getting like simple surgery to remove a mole. These kind of things that are much more everyday and much sooner. I'm very bullish on Neuralink in the long run, and I think that you should keep an eye on the amazing stuff folks are up to here. But
yeah, if DJ is in the office, tell him I say hi. We'd love to have him on the show.
I will.
Sometime.
I love DJ. He's great.
He's fantastic. You've been fantastic. Thanks so much for stopping by.
What I gotta ask before you go.
Sure.
You're skill maxed to the gills already, but what's next? What are you besides the new company? What are some areas that you're trying to level up now?
Believe it or not, the next thing I'm doing next week is I'm making a trumpet from first principles. I have a physics textbook, and I want to, like, without any reference, try to figure out how far apart all the valves should be. I want to cast it in my backyard with a big crucible, and I want to like play this thing, which probably won't work. And so I'll get better at metalworking, I'll get better at physics, I'll get better at all these little stupid things I care about, and it's a pretty fun little interstitial bit before I really put my head down and get back to the great doubling.
Come
incredible.
On the show
play
and play
the
your trumpet
live. I want to hear the demo.
Come on, we want to hear it.
I'm no good, I have to warn you, but I'll be better in 2 years.
So. In 2 years, you'll be good.
If it makes sound, it works.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great question, Jordy.
Awesome.
Thanks
All right, great
so
to meet you,
by.
Aiden. Congratulations.
See you later. Bye-bye.
This is fantastic. We'll talk to you soon. Next up, we got
Chad.
Colton coming in the studio. Welcome to Colton as soon as he hops in here.
The idea of just trying to get twice as cool.
It's so good. It's
constantly,
such a good bit.
And just never being like, I'm cool enough. I'm cool enough. No. Double.
It's the
great doubling. I mean, he doesn't look like doubling. I don't know if he can have champagne yet, but we followed a similar principle around the great doubling.
Exponential growth. It's the most powerful force in the world.
Something that you can understand unless you've experienced it.
Yeah, Einstein.
We experienced it going from 1,000 followers to 2,000 followers.
Yeah. Imagine that at trumpet manufacturing. Fantastic. Well, we have our next guest in the studio. Welcome to the stream, Colton. How are you doing?
Welcome.
Good. How are you guys doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
we can hear you.
Yes.
Would you mind kicking it off with a little introduction on yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure. My name's Colton. I'm from Philadelphia, but right now I'm in Boston working on my company called Orbit, which I think you guys actually got a brief introduction to because my teammate Steven was on here, I think just an hour or two ago.
That's right. Yeah.
There we go. The double Thiel fellow combo.
Give us your side of the story. What does he get wrong about Orbit? No, just unpack it again a little bit, and then we'll take the conversation in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you how I first heard about this idea and got involved with it.
Yeah, and how'd you meet him? I'd love to know that story. That's interesting.
Yeah. So Steven went to Georgetown, and he was looking for an engineer to help him build this neurotech. But there's no engineers at Georgetown at all. They don't have an engineering department. And so he was running around like the whole DMV area looking for an engineer that could help him build some of these circuits and the hardware and the code and such. And so eventually that led him to me. He tells me that he met with a lot of people, before, but
is the business guy yelling at you from the other room?
Yeah, I think he said something. I can't quite hear him. But
hey, hey, shut up, business guy. The engineers, the technical founder's talking.
So we'd met and we went on Zoom for a bit, and I already had an internship that I was very interested in lined up for the summer, but he started talking to me and explaining this idea that he had, and at least during the call, two things were pretty clear, and one, that Steven himself is an incredibly exceptional guy, and even after 2 years working with him, that is still true, and still impresses me. And the second thing was that he convinced me that neurotech was a harder problem to work on than any other problem that I was working on. So I was going into the field of aerospace, and I love jet engines. I think they're the most mechanically complex systems that exist today, and they're really cool for a lot of reasons. You have this really tight tug of war between crazy precise tolerances and like these extreme magnitudes and speed and heat and stresses, all these things. But it's a system that humans fully built and can analyze and look at, whereas the brain is kind of a black box. And the tool set that you need to approach the type of problems that we see when trying to build neurotech and interact with the brain in any way just forces you to be, in my opinion, like a lot more creative and search a much larger option space to get the answers that you want. And so I thought, this is an incredibly hard problem. I really want to work on this. We started working together that summer. I was still doing my internship, but that's 9 to 5. There's 16 more hours in a day. And eventually at the end of the summer, I told my supervisor at the company I was working at that I was going to leave a month early. And in August, Stephen and I went down to DC, just rented out an Airbnb for a month and just had this basically like a month-long build-a-thon where we tried to get the scrappiest MVP we could at the end of the month. And we did that, eventually went back to school. In the meantime, we were still working very hard on the project. In fact, I was failing most of my classes at the time until it got to the point of about like October or November when we had met with our first venture investor, and this is Dune Ventures. He funded a pre-seed round, and at that point, we were no longer resource constrained. The only constraint to us making progress was time. I actually did really enjoy school. I was a mechanical engineer at Hopkins, and I felt that through each of my classes, I was really expanding my tool set and the things that I could build, and also the types of engineering problems that I could analyze quantitatively. And so I did really love my classes there, but I figured I could either do school really well, I could do the startup really well. I couldn't do both at the same time. And it was a really obvious choice to choose the startup instead and work in this direction, because for me, it was very plain that this was the direction of growth, or at least the most growth that I could have. I still think that's true, and that's a large part of what guides my decisions and the path that I take in life.
Very cool.
Incredible.
Can you take me through some of the tech tree that led up to this point? Like, what are some devices or technologies that you think have kind of commercialized appropriately, or at least like laid the groundwork for what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's not a whole lot that laid the groundwork, like technology-wise. A lot of the stuff that we're using has actually been around for a very long time. And so if you think of the main application that we're looking at right now, vestibular stimulation, you basically just get a circuit that's a constant current stimulator. So it'll inject the same amount of current regardless of the resistance that your head is, because for humans, that actually varies a lot and can span even an order of magnitude, which is unlike a lot of other physiological characteristics. But the idea of having a constant current stimulator is a technology that we've had for a very long time. It's something that we've used for a human application in like TENS, for example, and TDCS and such. A big part of neurotech and the progress in neurotech, I think, is not actually implementationally constrained, and that like you do have to have good hardware and you do have to make it well and incredibly robust, but it's actually how you use that hardware. So the types of signals that you send, how you integrate them with the rest of your system, whether it's closed loop and you're taking certain measurements, how you're analyzing those measurements, feeding it back into the signals that you're sending, that actually gives you a lot more gain and a lot more innovation in neurotech.
Jordy?
Yeah, I'm also, the main question I had for Stephen earlier was around kind of like testing process, how, I imagine you guys both are super eager because of these sort of like fast feedback cycle, but what's your approach and how do you focus on learning through self-experimentation?
Yeah, there's two sides of it. So the first side is safety and stuff like that. And so for a lot of vestibular stimulation that's electrical, there's a good bit of precedence actually for how it's been used in the clinic in a very binary sort of way, where they aren't able to elicit a lot of autonomic functions that you'd like. But it's still shown with efficacy in a lot of research that, hey, you can take this current signal and you can send it to your vestibular system and there's no adverse effects. And it is a practice that they use very binarily in the clinic. And then when we're doing stuff that's more novel, we'll actually take a very rigorous approach to safety. And so a good example I can think of is when we were working with an ultrasound system, and no one before had ever used mechanical waves through ultrasound to elicit vestibular stimulation. We started, very bare bones with going to like simulations first, and then after doing simulations, getting like a fake skull that matches the physical properties of the head, putting that in a water tank, measuring with a hydrophone what the field is actually looking like, seeing that lines up with our simulations, basically doing weeks or even up to a month of the math, the numbers, the simulations to find out, hey, this is causing the exact effect that we want. And then based on that, then going to testing on really just like Stephen for a lot of the outside stuff to see that it works. And that's kind of the safety.
Stephen, yeah.
All right, bud.
Yeah,
it's time.
Lay down.
Exactly.
You're gonna want to lay down for this.
That's fantastic.
Are you guys getting to the point where you're really narrowing in on some of the more near-term commercial applications of what you're working on, or is it still kind of like, hey, there's so many different directions that we can take. We just need to continue to, experiment broadly and run a bunch of different types of tests?
More of the latter right now, not because we don't have a direction that seems viable, but we just don't know it's the best one yet. So I'm sure Steven's talked about some of it, but in a couple of different autonomic regulation fields, we have very powerful effect sizes, at least in the small sample sets that we've done, being just people within the company, co-founders and such. But for the types of effects that we're looking at, if you can't detect it without a larger sample size, say 50, 100 people, and it's just this stat sig effect that maybe placebo may not be, kind of like taking vitamins in the morning, it's not the effect that we're looking for. We're basically we're able to have this fast iteration cycle because the autonomic effects that we do elicit are very obvious, and it's very clear to me or Steven, whoever's being tested, oh, this isn't placebo, I'm actually feeling something that's crazy different. Now, in terms of getting a product
sleep, for example, this is an example that Steven gave earlier, just basically doubling your deep sleep, right? Something like that, every human has to sleep every single day. Is that not a big enough market to try to bring something to market there that could allow? I would personally pay a lot of money to be able to sleep for 6 hours and get the same effect as sleeping 8 hours. I'm curious, how you think of those trade-offs, basically, and I think a lot of teams would just say, hey, this is such a big opportunity. If we're seeing an effect here, we should really run this down.
In terms of, if I had to make a prediction about what would be our first product that we release, I would, with the information that we currently have, guess that it's a sleep product. And so a lot of the testing that we're doing right now is related to sleep. A lot of the engineering that we're doing is building out more robust systems that could actually be used already. For example, it's not some big prototype circuit, but something that you could wear and a form factor that people would want to wear in their sleep. And for us, what we're shooting for about right now is just a headband. Circuit's thin enough that you really don't notice anything other than just this piece of cloth that goes around your head and is, skin tight. That said, even though I'm confident we can build the sleep product right now and push towards a certain release that would be successful. And what you call successful, whether that's selling 10,000 units or 10 million units, is a bit more defined by what your goals are and why you want to release in the first place. For us, it's actually not so much about the money, but building a user base that we can start to expand in with neurotech. Your brain is a very intimate thing, and consumers are going to be very, very skeptical of the first neurotech products that come about. And so whether it's the case that you want to release a neurotech product that let's say feasibly could be sold to 10 million people or 50 million people if they're ready for it. And neurotech has become a more popular idea, rather than maybe finding a more niche entry market first and doing some type of launch that would give you more feedback and more information about what the marketplace is looking like, how ready people are for neurotech, and those types of questions. It's actually a lot less clear which of those paths is the best one. And I think it's very hard to get a clear answer to that unless we have a more clear picture of the scientific space and actually what types of effects we're looking for. And so sleep is something that you could go consumer with. You could sell to every person because every person sleeps. But if it turns out that there's, let's say, an unexpected amount of stickiness in the market with people that want to buy neurotech products, then a better approach may be to go with a fully medical product. So looking with people that have a disease where, hey, maybe neurotech is a little early for consumers, but if you're, and we can go actually even back to the sleep analog, let's say you're an insomniac who can struggle to sleep even 2-3 hours a night. Now wearing this headband and this idea of neurotech is not quite as, there's not quite as much skepticism, as in the friction's a little lower. And so there's kind of this back and forth between, we have to analyze what the market is looking like and what types of products are going to fit that market. And also what types of products can we build that are able to fit that market? And so it's a little bit harder to get feedback on the first one, being the market space, until I think our best information there is when we actually release a product to market and learn from it. But at least right now, there's a lot more to be learned on the science side. There's a lot more to be learned with sleep and how to not just make a system like that, but continually improve it and make it better. And then there's also a lot of sub branches that we want to continue to explore, so we know that we're not in some local maximum when maybe not too far there's another higher local maximum to be hit.
Very cool.
Fantastic answer.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to meet you, Colton. Congratulations on all the progress so
far.
Send
us a demo unit. Let's get
send
it
us
going.
a demo unit.
We can. Actually, that'd be great.
We're ready.
Awesome.
We're ready.
Yeah. And thanks so much for stopping by. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Cheers.
Have
Awesome.
a great day.
Very nice meeting you. Yeah.
Bye. Next up, we have Koki Mashita coming into the studio. our last Thiel Fellow of the day. Finishing it out strong. Welcome to the stream, Koki. How are you doing? Sorry for keeping you waiting. We were running long.
Welcome.
But you're here.
No
Please
worries.
introduce yourself and the company that you're building.
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. Thanks for the
course.
time. I'm Koki, originally from Japan.
Cool.
You know, I spent a lot of time growing up thinking about natural disasters. I think, in SF, you don't, it's like nice weather, everything's, kind of nice, and you get to work on really, really interesting things. But, I was in the 2011 earthquake where, 18,000 people died in a couple days, and a lot of my friends, homes were destroyed. And you have these like, typhoons, right? That like blow away my like grandparents' roofs every like 3 years or so. And I keep asking them like why? Like you can just like move because you're in Typhoon Alley. Like what's the whole point of having to stay there? But it's like something so deeply ingrained, right? It's something that you accept, that you kind of just accept as feet. And I was talking to the environment minister and the infrastructure minister of Japan recently, and they were saying that they spent billions of dollars on disaster infrastructure. Like they would build these like columns under Tokyo, right? So like when it floods, the water can go in. Yet like they were like, oh shoot, we haven't actually solved the problem, which is the intensification of these events. But back then I was 11 and I did not know that you can actually start to fight these natural disasters. But I started just like building robots when 3D printers were really popular, started selling them. And then the money I made from that I put into Bitcoin, and then got into like hedge funds in high school. I started a small one. And then in college I came across this startup which was building AI weather forecasts. As like not many people think about like weather forecasting as like this huge expense that you have to take on, but when you look at these larger countries, they spend about $2 billion per year on supercompute. Essentially, like a big chunk of the world's supercomputers are used on running partial differential equations to be able to calculate the weather, right? It's like something that you don't really think about. And with machine learning, what you're able to do is reduce costs by 99% and increase resolution by 100 times. And when you see that, like we started out, very small, like 5 people, but I was splitting time at Berkeley and then at the startup, and we became like the national weather forecast for the Philippines, where it's it was a lot more affordable. And I started to think about, okay, wow, like our understanding of not only just Earth itself, but like being able to model, gather data, and then predict has gotten so much better. I start to think about like what's the next natural step, right? Like the whole point of gaining more intelligence is so that you can act upon it, and that's what I started to think about. Can't really specifically tell you what we're doing in terms of the application layer, but this is kind of like the transformation we're thinking about.
So is it magic? Is it spells?
Are you going to bomb the hurricane? Is it a bomb? I've heard that pitched before.
I wonder where you heard that from. It's 10,000 times the power of a hurricane. Hurricanes are interesting, right? Because the power, the amount of energy that goes in there is so strong. Like if you look at Google research, they used to have this program where they're trying to harness energy out of a hurricane. And if you can, harness it properly, you can power the United States for months and months just from one hurricane.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Which is
That's
like
amazing.
a crazy thing to think about.
So you're going to make them, and then you're going to control them, and you're not, and then there's going to be a bunch of sci-fi offshoots where Koki
better be nice to me.
Koki had a good thing going. He was powering a lot of data centers with his homegrown hurricanes, and then one got out of control.
But I mean, talk to me about weather forecasting and kind of the data sources, because obviously, yes, a massive kind of revolution in AI machine learning generally. But
you slipped in that you're doing the weather forecasting for the Philippines.
Yeah,
like you guys are like a data provider already?
The previous company I worked at during school, that's what we're focused on. And a lot of it is coming up with models, right? How can you compute these partial differential equations more efficiently with the same amount of data you have?
And so you look like DeepMind or NVIDIA coming up with their like frontier models, right? Like being able to run diffusion based models to forecast better. But for us, what we think is fundamental is collecting data that no one really has. Like software has become so commoditized that like now it's just like Claude and then an XAI and then like OpenAI. It's just like a never-ending battle. For us, it's like how can you collect data and how can you like see the world in a different way that allows you to act upon it, and how can you causally act upon like a weather phenomena, right?
You mentioned diffusion. Is there a distinction between weather forecasting using diffusion models versus transformer-based models or token prediction models? Like, is that a meaningful distinction, or are you kind of using the term broadly?
It gets really complicated in a sense that I think both of them are good at kind of milking as much information, looking at okay, what are the latent parameters, how can you figure out somewhat unnoticeable characteristics within weather models. But I think the interpretability of weather models also become very important, right? Like if you can like characteristically like define okay, which parameter within a high dimensional vector, right, is creating a lot of bias, how can you tweak that so that you can get back on track? And this like weather is so chaotic that like even one small perturbation in an initial condition can really mess up the forecast, and that's why it's really difficult to forecast like a week out. And so being able to like assimilate data as you go, and that's why like we're focusing on okay, how can you collect data that no one really has, so that you can make sure you're not like debiased too much.
Talk to me about the data sources for this. I'm familiar with like Doppler radar systems that like the local news has. But are satellites playing a role now in weather prediction? Is the actual data that we're gathering to build these models on top of improving? And what are the key vectors that are driving better data going into these models?
Yeah, satellite data is interesting. A lot of reanalysis data has always been used, and it's made by NOAA or ECMWF. Unfortunately, NOAA is not doing too well now. What we're doing is building sensors and then literally like flying into storms or into clouds to measure within them. Right? It's a complex convective process that you really have to just send something in to measure it. Yeah.
Autonomous vehicle, I assume.
No,
you're flying the plane personally.
Our focus is on how can you build infrastructure,
sure,
right? Like infrastructure in the sense that, okay, models are a part of the infrastructure, but how can you collect data for, a targeted, vehicle? So for example, like hurricanes are interesting, right? Like, I'm sorry, like I can't, say everything in detail, but in terms of hurricanes, it's like, okay, if you want to see how convection is happening, what about, the density of clouds, what kind of grapple columns and water droplets exist, you really just have to fly like a plane in there. Like it's hard to just do like drones because it's too turbulent, or these like sensors are too big. And so thinking about that is an interesting problem as well. But I think fundamentally, right, what we're pushing against is that many of these, reactive methods of disaster, if you look at, insurance, right? Like there's about like $140 billion per year in insurance premiums issued in the US for like tropical cyclones. And yet like insurance premiums have doubled every single year for the last, 4 or 5 years in many coastal cities. And when you look at like another catastrophe happening, like last year, Hurricane Helene and Milton was bad, but it could have been a lot worse. They weren't even category 5s. And Congress had to give out $100 billion in aid, right? But when a next Hurricane Katrina happens in, Florida, for example, then insurance is just going to be insolvent in many ways.
Is there a market for better weather data by itself? I mean, it sounds like fighting the hurricane is important, but we talked to somebody who works in data brokerage loosely and said like everyone talks about, oh, we'll sell it to hedge funds, but there's only like 5 hedge funds that buy anything, and they're kind of stingy apparently, and they don't really buy that much data. You think about the insurance market, yeah, $140 billion, but if you're an insurer and you know that, a whole bunch of houses are going to be destroyed in 2 weeks, or in 4 weeks, you're not really going to be able to adjust premiums that fast to make up for that. So it feels like, and then you look at the government might want to know, but even then it's like, are they really a good buyer?
I'm just to continue spitballing. Yeah. In California, when there's certain communities that are threatened, they'll have like private fire response.
I guess that makes sense.
Basically, even an HOA.
Is that a good, but is that a reasonable market?
I'm just thinking about like
what are you thinking?
the dynamic right now where a hurricane is effectively forming.
Yeah.
And the response is to watch it and then tell people to evacuate based on where you think it's going to go.
Yeah.
And it's kind of insane that we don't have any sort of proactive response to say, hey, this thing is progressing to being more and more intense.
Sure.
Can we, sort of stop it?
Yeah. So data market. I don't know how much you can talk about it. We might just have to have you back on when you can talk.
No. When you look at insurance, it's pretty insane. Like they look at okay, what does hurricane damage look like in the last 40 years? Okay, let's aggregate, average, and then kind of add bias for like some of the intensification of these events or the increase and the exposure, and that's all you do. And so a lot of the interesting financial assets come up when you look at like catastrophe bonds. Right? Like they're like certain hedge funds that literally just trade on catastrophe bonds, right? And it's just about like estimating what is the arbitrage in terms of how much wildfire is going to wipe out a certain city, or same for hurricanes as well.
No, makes a ton of sense. We'll have to have you back when you can talk more about the product and where you're going with the company. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much for hopping on. This is a real pleasure.
Excited to hear more.
And congratulations. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for the
Cheers.
time.
Bye.